To order.
I have a live mic. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Bonner, for those who don't know me, and I am the newly elected chair of the the Civilian Oversight Commission for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We held elections actually at our last meeting in July. Besides the selection of a new chair, we selected two vice chairs for the commission, both of whom are here, Hans Johnson and Luis Garcia. We have a very full agenda before us today, and so I want to move this meeting right along, but I want to say that the meeting will include the recommendations of the ad hoc committee of the Oversight Commission and its proposed revisions to Chapter 3.79 of the County Code. That's the provisions of the County Code that set up the Oversight Commission, the Civilian Oversight Commission, back in almost 8 years ago, back in 2016. These are revisions that, as we'll discuss, the commission, the ad hoc committee believes are essential to this commission performing effective oversight over the Sheriff's Department. I also want to welcome and introduce our newest commissioner, Arthur Callaway. Mr. Callaway now rounds out the commission back to its complement of 9 commissioners, and I couldn't be more pleased to welcome and have on board Arthur Callaway, and I want to just thank you now for agreeing to perform this important public service of being a commissioner of the Civilian Oversight Commission. We're going to receive a couple of presentations today from the Sheriff's Department and the Inspector General's office with respect to the homeless issue or the homeless outreach services team, and also the fairly recent revisions to the Sheriff's Department's use of force policy. Now that said, let me turn to Tracy Jordan to explain how members of the public can participate during this meeting. Tracy.
Good morning and welcome. If you wish to speak in person at today's meeting, please turn in your public comment card at the table with the public comment sign. If you are remote, raise your hand in WebEx or press 3 on the phone. Each person who signs up for public comment will have 2 minutes to speak. Please note that the chair may adjust your allotted time to less than 2 minutes for each public comment, depending on the number of individuals who have public comment. For each agenda item, I will call the public comment after our commission discussion. General public comment will be heard near the ending of the meeting agenda under non-agenda public comment item 12. Now I will turn it over to Daniel Delgadillo, who will announce the public comment rules in Spanish.
Le damos la bienvenida a esta reunión a miembros de la comunidad quienes prefieren hacer sus comentarios en español. Les daremos 2 minutos y podemos proveer traducción al inglés. Simplemente diga la palabra español antes de comenzar sus comentarios y le diremos cómo proceder. Gracias.
All right. Let me just briefly mention the code of conduct that governs our proceedings. And this is just a reminder that there is a code of conduct and that we expect speakers will stop speaking when their time has ended. Public comment that is made with respect to an agenda item will relate to that agenda item. There's a opportunity toward the end to, if any member of the public wishes to make general public comments to the commission. It's very important, and I remind you that to be respectful and refrain from profane or derogatory or abusive statements or language, be respectful of the views of others, and don't disrupt the meeting. Those are the general rules. I think I've fairly summarized them. Let's move on now to call the roll to make sure we have a quorum. Ms. Johnson?
I will now conduct the roll call. Chair Robert C. Bonner,
Here.
Co-Vice Chair Luis S. Garcia,
Here.
Co-Vice Chair Hans Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Arthur Callaway,
Here.
Commissioner Irma Cooper, absent. Commissioner Patricia Giggins,
Here.
Commissioner James P. Harris,
Here.
Commissioner Jamon R. Hicks,
Present.
Commissioner Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Chair Bonner, we have a quorum. I turn it back to you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the consent calendar. We have two matters on the consent calendar. One is the approval of the minutes of the meetings that took place on June 27th and July 18th of this year, and also the on for approval is a revised list of the ad hoc committees of this commission. Essentially dissolving two of the ad hoc committees is no longer needed, and making some slight adjustments to assignments to various committees. So, by the way, in that, with respect to that attachment to the agenda, with respect to the ad hoc committees and its membership, let me just say to every member of the commission, any one of you, and I hope you will, can speak to me offline, either today or later, as to any particular commission or adjustment you might want to make. But we are making a few adjustments with respect to the membership of the commission. I might note too that I don't see it on here, but the Patty Giggins is going to be rotating off the PRIA ad hoc committee and assigned to another committee. And we may want to add somebody else to that committee, but we'll certainly need a new lead. Patty has done an extraordinary job heading that committee. Certainly, I'll open it up to any discussion, but I would like to have maybe just a motion to approve the consent agenda and perhaps a second. Would anyone make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move.
All right.
I'll second.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion of the consent agenda? Did anybody sign up to make public comment on the consent agenda? Ms. Johnson?
There are no public comments on this item.
All right. Rather than did I say Johnson? I'm looking at Hans and I'm thinking Tracy, and by the way, I've always called her Tracy, so forgive me, Tracy. So I think this can be done by just a voice vote. So I'm just going to ask all of the commissioners that are voting in favor of approving the consent agenda to signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Are there any abstention? Please indicate. Looks like the motion is carried 8 voting aye, no abstentions. Let's move on to the agenda to the next item, which is the this is initially we had subpoenaed today, just for the record, let me say we had subpoenaed today an individual who is currently with the Sheriff's Department as a sergeant. His name is Max Fernandez. After discussions with his counsel, we are essentially delaying or continuing his testimony to a special hearing that will be held by the Civilian Oversight Commission, led by the Ad hoc Committee on Deputy Gangs, Cliques, and Subgroups, which will take place on October the 11th, starting at 9 a.m. at Loyola Law School, the Robinson Auditorium there. So take notice of that. So the subpoena of Mr. Fernandez will be continued until that time and date, in agreement with his counsel. The second thing, though, I wish to mention is that the Ad hoc Committee on Deputy Gangs would also is requesting that the Oversight Commission issue a subpoena for a second individual who is no longer, I believe, no longer with the Sheriff's Department. He may be retired, but his name is Mark Lilienfeld. And Mr. Lilienfeld, I don't think many of us will remember, we had subpoenaed him actually over a year or two ago. And for one reason or another, he didn't attend. But our council, both county council and our Harv Anand have recommended that we reissue the subpoena for Mark Lilienfeld. And so I'm going to, I think there's a motion on calendar as an action item that the full commission approve the issuance of a subpoena to Mark Lilienfeld to appear on October the 11th of this year, 2024, at Loyola Law School to testify before the special hearing of this commission. So I'm going to need a motion and a second for that. We could.
I make that motion.
I'll second.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. I think we could probably go ahead and vote. Is there anybody signed up to discuss this particular agenda item?
Yes, we have 3 in-person public comments on this item.
All right, all right. So now they should be addressed to this item, which is essentially the issuance of the subpoena. And would you call the first person to give public comment?
First person is Raquel Derfler.
Yep. Well, just ask the question again. I didn't quite hear it.
Here we go. I just want to clarify that this item, we are able to comment on deputy gangs. Is this correct? I just want to clarify with the chair.
You know, I think this is probably not the right time, if you don't mind. I mean, we'll make sure you have comment, but this would really be just all we did with this action item is essentially vote to issue a subpoena and notice that we're going to have a special hearing. So,
Okay. Well, I will say we are in support of that. So thank you.
thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on it? I guess we had a couple of other people signed up.
Yes, the next person is Cassandra Hernandez.
Field?
The next person is Cindy Nunez.
Thank you. Thank you for that. All
There are
right.
also-
So we have a motion. We have a second for oh, wait a minute. There's yet another, excuse me.
We have 2 individuals that signed up online to speak on this item.
Okay. Maybe they'll,
Paloma Serna. Paloma Serna.
North County Equity and Justice Coalition and it's Saving Lives in Custody, California. I agree with the subpoena of holding gang sheriff in the LA County accountable for their action. And we are having an issue in the San Diego County jails also with drugs being brought in, and I'm sure the deputies are part of that. So I thank you for subpoena these former deputies and holding them accountable. Thank you.
thank you.
And the final public comment on this item is Benny Adrian. Benny Adrian, you're
Thank you.
unmuted.
Hello, thank you. I wanted to express my support for your efforts to continue to pursue these inquiries and this investigation that you've been trying to do for years. It's not a surprise that it's taken this long, but I'm glad that it has, and I support that you continue to do this. And I really hope that this is just the beginning and that there's going to be a downpour of LASD deputies walking up in front of you, swearing to tell the truth and holding them accountable. If they decide that they don't want to answer any questions, of course, you know, I hope that you have some teeth at that point, because I feel that it's important to support the Oversight Commission in these efforts. It's something that the organization I work with, Centro CSO, is working for in our community to make sure that we hold these deputy gangs accountable. And so I hope to see members or suspected members in front of you answering all questions that you have, including Sheriff Luna. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further public comments.
Right, so we have a motion and a second to issue a subpoena to Mark Lilienfeld. Let's do that by just a voice vote. All of those favor of issuing the subpoena signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right, that motion carries 8-0. The next item on the agenda is family impact remarks. We don't have any family impact remarks. There were a couple of, but we will have some family impact remarks. Oh, excuse me. I believe at our next meeting, but let me first of all clarify that with Ms. Jordan. Are there any family impact remarks that have been scheduled for this?
There are no family impact remarks scheduled for this meeting. However, we will have for the next month.
Oh, okay. So, and I know at least a couple of families have indicated they want to express their concerns to us. So, but I think it has to be, the problem is, by the way, let me say on family impact remarks, it's really helpful to us if we get the request in at least really a week before we have our meeting, because we set the agenda. And I think we really have a very packed agenda that we're going to be, I'm just hoping we can get to everything we have on the agenda, because all of it is, there are some very important discussions that need to take place. So,
Yeah, Chair Bonner, if I might comment.
oh. You've got it. I do want to say this. I'm probably going to skip over a couple of things on the agenda because I know the sheriff has a hard stop on this meeting. And I actually want to make sure we have an opportunity. I can't even see the sheriff from where I am. There he is. I want to make sure we have an opportunity for him to address us on a couple of things that I'm sure he might want to talk to us about, including the very newly announced policy with respect to a prohibition on deputy gangs. In any event, though, since you're here, please step forward and let us hear from you as part of the family impact remarks portion of our agenda.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Cindy Nunez. I just wanted to start off by saying I was very deeply disappointed to receive a phone call and Chair Bonner, your decision to remove family impact statements from today's agendas. As again, thank you right now for giving me the 5 minutes, but these impact statements are so important to us families. And this is why we come here. I couldn't wait till October to tell you what LASD has been doing. So I want to thank you for that. Luna, we all know about your gangs. Our very own deputies are testifying against your deputy gangs. We continue telling everyone we come across to Google LASD gangs. This is really happening, and it's been 189 days that us, my family, have been going through it. You do nothing about it. LASD failed Francisco Nunez. You know that, we know that, everybody knows that. And LASD, you control your complaints, you investigate your own complaints, then you do nothing about it, and you make it all go away for your deputies. I've done everything in my part, from filing complaints, submitting evidence to your sergeants, followed every LASD policy and procedure, as I work with LASD, so I'm very aware of your policy and procedures. I show up to these meetings. I have meetings with your Office of Constitutional Policing. I speak to your sergeants. I've spoken to your lieutenants. I've spoken to Homicide. I tried working with Homicide in good faith. I spoke to your Captain Bartlett at Lancaster Station, and yet, Luna, you have done absolutely nothing about this. And I'm talking about the harassment. I know LA County's policy and procedure very well, as I am a county employee myself. This is unacceptable behavior and a lack of accountability from LASD administration, and that means your administration. I continue documenting and recording this continuous ongoing harassment by your personnel in Lancaster since March of 2024. So I have the proof, just so I can have proof that this is really happening to me. This is not fake. This is not to be investigated. I've submitted videos. I have hours, minutes, pictures of your deputies harassing my witnesses, harassing me, harassing my children and my family. This is not makeup. I'm not here to waste your time or lie. I have no reason to do so. I'm telling you that this is happening, and it's been happening for 189 days, and nothing has been done. I submitted my complaints through the Inspector General's office. He said he would assign an attorney to overlook the complaints. Nothing has been done. I followed up with your Sergeant Diaz, he's a lieutenant. I don't get no responses since March. I'm standing here before the committee, before the commission, and yourself. So if something does happen to me, my witnesses, or my family, I'm on the record letting you know that they're after my family. This has been going on recently. Gang Unit Lieutenant Waiters and his team went to our witness's residence, knocking on all the doors, showing her picture to neighbors, requesting and demanding where she was over a complaint that we filed against Detective Albert White for harassment and intimidating a witness. Witness fears for her safety. She's not a criminal. These are extreme actions being conducted for a complaint of misconduct by your detectives. Interesting that initially, Homicide Detective Leopoldo Sanchez, who has been identified as a bandito, showed no interest in speaking with any of our witnesses from the night Francisco had contact with your deputies. Why the continuous harassment with me and our witnesses? Robert Garcia, while in custody, harassed. The 14-year-old was shot 5 times by your deputy, Daniel Contreras, from East LA Station. This witness, she's being harassed and treated like a criminal by your gang unit. On September 13, LASD, your deputies, were walked right in front of my house at 8:19 in the night. One on each side, no police activity, just walking in the night, no patrol car in sight. We got that all on video. One of your patrol cars picks them up and they leave, flashing their lights when it's very well-lit area to let me know that they know where I live. And that's unacceptable. And now I fear for my life, for my children. My son was outside walking the dog that day, and he's seen your deputy walking by. So you're gonna tell me to tell my kids not to fear your deputies? But your Lancaster station on social media has your deputies walking children to school? What you guys fail to show is that they're intimidating us. I've done nothing wrong. I'm not a criminal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so thank you for your comments, and I know that we have, that maybe this commission needs to make a formal request that if we haven't done so, that the Francisco Nunez, that this matter be, that we request the IG to make an inquiry as to the status of the Sheriff's Department's investigation with respect to this matter. Mr. Huntsman?
Our ability to investigate is currently blocked by the courts, and so we cannot conduct independent investigation. We have monitored this process. I do have an attorney assigned to monitor what the Sheriff's Department is doing, but I have no abilities beyond that because we're enjoined from doing more, although our statutes and ordinance allow us to.
Well, that's truly distressing and disturbing to hear. Let me just, I think this matter, probably what I'd like with respect to this matter is for the use of force ad hoc committee to take a look at how we might actually get access to information so we at least understand the status of the investigation and what is or is not being done.
We'll do that.
All right.
Chair, Chair Bonner.
All right, so let's move on to the agenda.
Before we go on, can I make just one note? Because there was an overtone from the testimony we just heard involving possible retaliation against someone who had made a complaint. with the IG's office and with that sheriff station in the Antelope Valley. I believe it was the Lancaster station. And I just want to make specific note that part of what is extremely disturbing about the testimony we just heard is the evidence of retaliation going on against a witness and the efforts to use pressure on either neighbors or other members of the community to try to amplify that retaliation and the intimidation that was reported in the remarks that we just heard. That is extremely disturbing and is very concerning, involving the integrity of the operations there and of the intent of the people involved in that station's investigation.
That's a point very well taken. And let me also say, I didn't specifically include that, but any retaliation or harassment of family members, we've recommended that that be a violation, a specific violation of Sheriff's Department policy. And so let me also pack that in to the Use of Force Ad Hoc Committee with a report back, hopefully at our next meeting, with respect to at least giving us some assessment as to what, if anything, is being done within the Sheriff's Department to address both those issues. All right, so I'm turning now to item 7 on the agenda, and I believe this is item 7. Yes, and I've covered the introduction here. I'm going to defer B because I do want to get to Sheriff Luna and his comments. So I'll just defer the update on 3 requests for review that ad hoc committees and I as chair have submitted to the Sheriff's Department. So let's skip over that and we'll go to item C, which to me is perhaps the most important item on the agenda this morning. And that is the proposal by the Governance Ad Hoc Committee or Rules Ad Hoc Committee to be renamed the Governance Ad Hoc Committee. But it has proposed some really important revisions to Chapter 3.79 of the County Code, and that's the provisions that initially set up this commission back 8 years ago. It's a long time ago, and they haven't really been updated except for a couple of tweaks to add some Measure R authorities that the commission received under important authorities that the commission received under Measure R. By the way, the members of the ad hoc committee are Sean Kennedy, Hans Johnson, J.P. Harris, and me. And I must say we've received very important contributions to these proposed revisions from a true subject matter expert, and that is our own executive director, Charmaine Mosley, and also from the deputy executive director, Dr. Ochoa. So, but just to briefly summarize before asking for a motion, the important things that these revisions do, number one is it would provide a legal framework. If the Board of Supervisors approves these revisions, it will provide a legal framework by which the Oversight Commission would be able to receive confidential information that contained in reports, investigative reports, and other reports of the Sheriff's Department. I mean, it is pretty shocking in a way that here we are almost 8 years from the creation of this commission, and we still do not have a legal mechanism to access confidential information. When I say confidential information, I mean the confidential information that is protected by state, where law enforcement officers in California are protected by state statute, but still as an oversight commission, we should be entitled to be able to access and review that information. And these revisions would permit that for the first time to happen if the Board of Supervisors approves them. Secondly, these revisions clarify that our oversight is intended to be and should be independent, that we provide independent oversight over the Sheriff's Department, and we, as a commission, as a body, do that independently, coming to hopefully fact-based, merit-based decisions and recommendations with respect to reforms of the Sheriff's Department. And the third key thing, I think it's a pretty key thing, is that a lot of times there are recommendations, and I'm not speaking of the current sheriff here. I'm having in mind a former sheriff, but nonetheless, these are long-term changes to ordinance are long-term, so it doesn't matter who the particular sheriff is. But we have noticed that in many instances, recommendations of thoughtful, thought-out recommendations for reform and change and improvements of the sheriff's department are just ignored. And so the revisions would also require this sheriff, if he decides not to adopt a recommendation of this commission, to explain in writing why within 60 days of our recommendation. It also, by the way, of some importance, this gets a little bit into the weeds, but these revisions would also make clear that in appropriate situations, which are very limited under the government code, the California law, the commission could go into closed sessions to receive privileged and sensitive personnel information and the like. So those are the key changes and reforms. I would just say that from my point of view, as a member of this commission, now chair, these revisions are absolutely essential if we're going to be not just more effective, but effective in performing the oversight function that I believe the public and I believe the board wants to see occur. So that's my general background on item C. I want to open this up for discussion among the commissioners initially, but I think maybe before that, I would certainly entertain a motion to approve the ad hoc for the full commission to approve these, and by that motion, we would be submitting these recommended revisions to 3.79 to the Board of Supervisors through the executive officer or the board for the Board of Supervisors to not only consider, but hopefully amend the 3.79 to make these revisions. So we would get that process started. Two other minor things I want to mention. We did attach the 3.79 revisions with a preamble that was drafted by the ad hoc committee that explains why we're asking for these revisions to 3.79. But Dr. Ochoa identified any number of typos and grammatical errors. Just let me assure everybody on this commission that all of those grammatical errors and typos will be cleaned up before this moves forward to the Board of Supervisors. And lastly, there was one thing that was an omission, but I wish to point it out, and I don't have a copy of the revisions to 3.79 in front of me. I'm looking at my executive director. Apparently she doesn't either, and I don't have my laptop. I think it's 0.140, but there was an omission. This, by the way, this is truly minor, but there is a provision in the 3.79 that says we will elect a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary and such other officers. We obviously have decided to elect more than one vice chair, so that's reflected, but we didn't put a strike through a secretary, and we should, because that ordinance mandates that we have a secretary for the commission. And since our existence, we've never had a secretary. So we just it's pure minor, but I want to point out that in the version you read, that strike through didn't appear and it should have appeared. So with that in mind, first of all, I'd like a motion if we could have one in a second, and then let's open it up for discussion among the members of the commission.
I'll move.
Okay, we have Commissioner Harris. Is there a second? All right, it's moved and seconded. So discussion, and this is on opportunity. The unfortunate thing about our commission is because we're a Brown Act, there's certain commissioners that for the first time actually had a chance to read the proposed revisions. And I realize that puts, that's not ideal, but that's just the way it is with the Brown Act. But Commissioner Kennedy, did you wish to be heard?
I just want to strongly support these revisions. They were done by people who actually care about the mission of this commission to provide meaningful oversight of the LASD. The prior ordinance had a lot of a lot of statements that undermined our effectiveness and were not accurate statements of the law. This ad hoc committee and our director and executive director have really spent a lot of time actually proposing revisions that reflect our independent authority under Measure R and also correct misstatements of the law or overstatements of the law that are used to undermine our ability to access confidential information. So I just really support this, and I hope my fellow commissioners will as well.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from members of the commission? Well, it looks like everybody has read it. That's very gratifying to know. No, I know there is, Patty. But we've been working at this for a while, so I think everybody understands what the issues and problems have been, and that's good. Let me ask, are there any public comments on the 3.79 revisions, Ms. Jordan?
Yes, we have 3 public comments.
Let's take public comments at this time.
Max has a comment first, if we can take Max.
Chair Bonner, would it be all right if I commented?
Of course.
I'm here not sitting up there for different reasons, but the reason I'm here today is because of this motion, and I wanted to say that I'm very, very strongly in support. I echo everything that the chair and Commissioner Kennedy said. It's an important step for this. I think unquestionably, as was stated, this isn't just something that would be a good idea. It's an absolute necessity for this to be a meaningful process. We began in the dark. We've been kept in the dark. This goes for my office as well as your commission, and we need to get out of the dark. I have some suggestions for modifications and whatnot, but they have nothing to do with my wholehearted support. If it went forward word for word as it is, it would be a great step in the right direction. What just happened with the gang policy and our attempts to access documents regarding gang investigation demonstrates that if we're going to be denied access to the important documents, we're not going to be successful. So I thank you very much for this motion. I hope you will move forward with it, and I hope the board will take the recommendation of this commission.
Thank you, Mr. Huntsman, for that. Other public comment?
The first public comment in person is Melissa Camacho.
Ms. Camacho?
Good morning, Melissa Camacho from the ACLU Southern California. As this body knows, we are plaintiffs' counsel in 3 cases against the county and the sheriff's department for certain conditions in the jails and also uses of force in the downtown facilities. In our use of force case, we see time and time again where sheriff's personnel are not called out for policy violations, and even when they are, only sent to training or perhaps just written reprimands. In the last report by the neutral monitors in Rosas, they found 17 cases involving use head strikes out of policy, where the sheriff's department found only 2. So for those 15 cases, this body is not able to see what went wrong. This body cannot see the patterns, can see where the breakdowns are. Is it sergeants? Is it commanders? Who is making these errors and who is allowing people to go without accountability for out of policy uses of force? Changes to this charter are essential for this group to carry out its function and to oversee the sheriff's department effectively. When the county established this group, I think we were at the forward edge, but now it's time to come in line with other jurisdictions who have meaningful access and insight into confidential information. And I trust that with that confidential information, this body will be able to provide the oversight that it really desires. I also support the changes that will allow the COC to inspect the jails. While the Civil Brand Commission has that access, I think this body will be able to follow up on SBC and OIG reporting and be able to see whether changes the Sheriff's Department has indicated it's going to make are actually going to be made. So we strongly support the changes to the charter. We will also go before the board and support it as well. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho.
Thank you. The next public comment in person is Allie Rubenfield.
Good morning, Commissioners. These amendments are an exciting and essential step for this body to be able to perform a real oversight function. The Commission's independence must be codified and needs access to the confidential information in order to do the job that voters demanded it do through Measure R. Since 2016, LASD has thwarted oversight by refusing to cooperate with this Commission and fails to deliver information this body clearly needs to look into the crisis of deputy gangs and family harassment. We have seen time and time again that LASD is unwilling to investigate itself. And we've seen today just how long it takes LASD to draft a state mandated policy on deputy gangs. And today we just heard that the Sheriff's Union, ALADS, has weaponized the legal system to block the OIG's ability to investigate deputy gangs. This commission needs the power to investigate, it needs access to the jails, it needs access to confidential information, and it needs all of this to be codified in its ordinance so that it has true power and the ability to do its job. LASD is the largest sheriff's department in the world with $4 billion of the county's dollars in its pocket. This commission needs resources and tools commensurate with its duties to oversee this department in order to ensure that the people of LA County are safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment in person is Raquel Derfler.
Good morning. It's important that these amendments are adopted. Currently, as it stands, this body cannot conduct its own investigation, but yet really cannot rely on the Sheriff's Department to investigate itself. Plain spoken, even if the individuals in the department want to really look at these incidents, they're always going to view it through the lens of law enforcement. They're always going to believe that people are going to do the right thing or they're going to follow the procedure, the ideal of justice, right? But in reality, that's not how it works. So we need a body like this that can look at it from the outside, from the real world, and honestly investigate these complaints that come up. This body has good intentions, but as currently written, the ordinance does not give them the power to act on those good intentions. Also, it is much needed that the recommendations from this body are actually enforced, that are actually put into action, because otherwise this body is just seen as useless. I'm not trying to be mean. I know you're not useless, but people say, what's the point of you if it's just a recommendation? Many times people do not want to take that extra step of going to a Board of Supervisors meeting and imploring the BOS to adopt these things. So very important that you have the power to actually make recommendations that are implemented. And then lastly, county council enforcing subpoenas that you put to LASD is laughable. I get that they're there because they are the ones that represent county employees, but that is ridiculous. There is no way that they can enforce your subpoena and also be protecting the sheriff's department. So that's how y'all go in a circle. There's just too much of a conflict of interest. So this body needs its own lawyers to be able to enforce the subpoenas on the sheriff's department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 online public comments. We'll call the first one, Carlos Montes. Carlos, you are now unmuted.
Central CSO Community Service Organization. Can you hear me okay? I heard an echo.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. No, I obviously support your motion. I believe that we need stronger civilian oversight of the LA Sheriff's Department. The Civilian Oversight Commission has done some great work over the years, but you're limited by the lack of strong oversight over the sheriffs. Hopefully, this change to the Charter 3.79 of the County Code will give you that power. So I strongly urge you to have the executive officer of the Board of Supervisors agendaize this item so that we could go to the Board of Supervisors and move forward with this. I'm 77. I've been dealing with the sheriff issue all my life, growing up in East LA, getting harassed, being arrested, being beat up in the county jail, working with families that continue to face brutality and the killing of their young Chicano men here in East LA. So I'll continue to advocate for the families. So in closing, again, I support this move for stronger oversight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next online public comment is Benny Adrian. Benny, you have been unmuted.
Hello, thank you again to the Oversight Commission. These proposals should definitely go through, and there needs to be more, I believe. More resources, definitely, to pursue better counsel and consultations whenever there's conflicts of interest. I'm also with Central CSO from the community, grew up in South Central, Southgate, have family in East Los Angeles and are affected by the sheriffs. I've had presence of law enforcement when I was younger, not understanding, but really believing what they stood for. And then being exposed to reality as I became an adult and started to see between the lines with these relationships that I had within the sheriff's department. Not to disclose any pertinent information, but a lot of this access to confidential information, it's imperative that you have access to that in order to make sure that you can see their electronic communications. Those are a wealth of resource to figure out what is going on. And if you don't have that, it's going to be a lot bigger task. And so I'm in full support of y'all getting more resources, and especially please have access to your own oversight of and access to the jails, because that's another place where there's a lot of abuse. And so I thank you for your time, and again, keep pushing for this access, please.
Thank you. Our next online public comment is from S. S, you are now unmuted.
I support the measure to hold the sheriffs actually accountable while LASD and unions fail to comply with committee. It's always us taking more steps to comply while they avoid accountability. But I really want to direct this comment to the Inspector General, whose comments earlier towards the Francisco Nunez family and witnesses regarding the intimidation and harassment, and not be able to do anything while courts investigate, but the sheriffs continue their harassment, intimidation, kidnapping, shooting, and killing witnesses with impunity while we follow laws and chain of command. And the IG response to all of that is BS. We're being harassed. Like, this is real life. While you go and live in your privileged houses, there's never accountability from the IG, hence why we're facing this measure to actually get accountability. You guys sit there and ignore us and ignore families while we're killed, jailed, locked up, beat up, harassed, and do nothing. So I support this measure. And Luna, IG, do something before we start marching to your houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last online public comment is from Paloma Serna. Paloma, you have been unmuted.
Hi, my name is Paloma Serna. I am with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the Saving Lives in Custody of California. And I am also the mother of Elisa Serna, who died in the Las Colinas jail in San Diego County in November 11th, 2019. And so I really do hope that you would continue, board members, to fight to have oversight over the sheriff. You definitely do need your own lawyer. You don't need the county's lawyer who's going to always try to protect their own. And also too, it is stated that last year there was 68 in custody deaths in the LA jails, and this year it's already 23. When will these killings be stopped? When will the sheriff and their deputy gangs members be held accountable for the deaths of our loved one? Like what was stated earlier, if it was us, that committed these crimes, we would have been charged, tried, and convicted within the first year. Here, it's taking years for deputies and medical staff to be held accountable for the deaths of our loved ones. Please, I ask and I beg you guys to continue to fight. It will be a long road, but I need you guys to fight to stop the killing of our children, of our brothers, of our fathers, of our sisters, of our mothers. They do not deserve a death sentence for accidents, for addictions. Majority of these impacted deaths have not even stepped a foot into the court. So please help us, and we thank you for your hard work.
7-6.
Thank you. There are no further public comments on this item.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. So let me just restate the motion, and then I'm gonna ask for a roll call vote on this because it's going to the board, and I want them to know that we took a roll call. So the action item or motion is for the full commission to approve and adopt the proposed revisions to Chapter 3.79 of the County Code and direct the Executive Director, Ms. Mosley, to promptly forward the proposed revised ordinance to the Board of Supervisors through the Executive Officer or the Board. That's the motion. It's been seconded. I'd like a roll call vote at this point.
I will now conduct roll call. Chair Robert C. Bonner,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Luis S. Garcia,
Aye.
Co-Vice Chair Hans Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Arthur Callaway,
Yes.
Commissioner Irma Cooper, absent. Commissioner Patricia Giggins,
Yes.
Commissioner James P. Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Jaman R. Hicks,
Yes.
Commissioner Sean Kennedy.
Yes.
I believe the motion passed.
You have 8 yes and 0 abstentions.
All right, thank you. Thank you, fellow commissioners. Thank you for the public comments and support. Let me turn, I'm going to skip over the executive director's report because in the interest, I know the sheriff has a scheduling issue here and we want to hear from Sheriff Luna. So first of all, Sheriff, thank you for being here and attending. That's number one. I know we have on the agenda itself a possible discussion by you of the 2-captain model that has been implemented, at least at a couple of the patrol stations at the Sheriff's Department. But you might want to also speak to what the recent announcement, I mean, a rather major announcement, a milestone really, that you as sheriff adopted a policy that prohibits deputies from participating in law enforcement gangs and hate groups. And so you might want to comment on that. But I will say that really it's your time. We want to hear from you and we want to hear anything you think would be of importance for this commission to learn about from your perspective as sheriff. Sheriff Luna.
Thank you and good morning to everybody. And then just before I get started, I'll try and be as concise as I can. Cindy Nunez, I heard you loud and clear. And I'm going to make sure that these allegations you brought up today are objectively looked into. Okay. So I just want to make sure you know that. As I move on, year to date, just some numbers for us as I report every month. Part 1 crime is down 0.6%. Violent crime is down 2.47%. Property crime down 1.1%, being driven by burglary and auto theft. The creation of our crime analysis unit or crime impact unit is really having an impact on reducing specifically what was driving our Part 1 crime, which was auto theft. So I'd like to thank Assistant Sheriff Myron Johnson, who's in the audience, because he, through his leadership of doing that. Monthly calls for service, we're handling an average of 83,958 calls for service a month. Observations, 84,961 a month. Arrest, which is not one of the primary factors we brag about, is 5,155 a month. And then guns seized, the number I have is 1,254. We are taking way too many guns off the street. Use of force year to date, our custody use of force is down 5.2%. Our patrol use of force is down 10.4% for a department, because there's other categories of other specialized units. So as a whole, our use of force for the department is down 9.6%. Our deputy involved shootings, though, are up. We are up by 5 at this time compared to last year. Some of the last body worn camera footage that I've seen, very troubling from an aspect of 2 of them. You have a young man, unfortunately, charging a deputy at full speed with a large pair of scissors. In another case, another young man, after trying to de-escalate the situation, charges a deputy with a knife. But those are 2 cases that are still being reviewed and looked at in the process. So we'll see what the final outcome is. And then the last number I just wanted to report to you is that our in-custody deaths are down 25.8%. And I say that with a lot of hesitation, because every death that happens in our custody is not good. You don't want anybody to die. Last year, we had a total of 45. This year, or last year at this time, we were at 31. So that's where the decrease comes in. But we continue to work very hard to try to lower that as much as we possibly can. Real quick, with the 2-captain model, you all have a report that we sent. I believe, and that, by the way, to start off, was one of the recommendations from this board. So I want to acknowledge the fact that you put that out to us. We originally asked for 6 stations. We were only budgeted for 3 stations. So we have the Lancaster, Palmdale, and East Los Angeles station that we took as a priority. Based on the statistics, which I don't have time to get into, you have that in writing. You see that that model initially appears to be working. There is more oversight. There is more time to start digging into some of the use of force cases. We're doing a better job, but I want to clarify, there's still a lot of work to do. I'm not sitting here saying it's the greatest thing. I'm just saying it's significant progress as we move forward. So thank you for that recommendation. We'll continue to work with the board in the future. There's been a lot of questions, as there should be, anytime we're spending more money. So there's good debate, good healthy debate going on behind the scenes. So that is a good thing. Judge Bonner, you mentioned our gang policy that we announced yesterday. Again, I do want to start off by thanking this commission, the Office of the Inspector General, County Council. There's so many people involved. It was a difficult path. It took months. We talked about it in here every month. You were asking me, why isn't this getting done? Why isn't this getting done? A lot of meet and confer. If any of you have ever been involved in labor negotiations, not everybody gets what they want. There are compromises that are made, but I believe that the policy that has come out, and again, this is just law enforcement gangs and hate groups, that it is a good policy. It absolutely follows state law. It will be effective in sending a very strong message to all of our employees that this conduct will absolutely not be tolerated and that it's unacceptable. Is there more work to do? There is, because when we went in with this, as many of you know, it went in as a gang, clique, and subgroups policy. I did make the decision somewhere in the middle of it that it needed to be bifurcated, but we are going to be going back to the table to more meet and confers regarding the cliques and the subgroups. That is not done. It's a work in progress, but this is, I believe, significant progress moving forward. It makes it a lot stronger than the one that was there in the past. And I've given you examples of even before this policy was enacted, there are changes that are occurring within the department that I'm very proud of. And that's a lot from, again, everybody I just named, all of you, the Inspector General's office. Even though we always don't see eye to eye, there is progress being made, and I'm very proud of that. Just the last number I'll throw out for us is just for this year, this commission has requested 54 different items. And in my statistics, I have that we have 50 of the 54 completed, still working on the others, with the approximate volume of material being about 1,034 pages that we provided. So we continue to work with that manner. That's the quickest summary that I can give you on some of the things that I thought were important and relevant. I hope I can answer questions for you.
Let me open it up for the commission here for any questions or comments you want to make to Sheriff Luna. Anybody have any, I mean, I have one if nobody else does, but yeah.
I have one too.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. Sheriff, thank you for enacting a anti-law enforcement gang policy. It's a long overdue and important first step. What I would like to know is, will the department now investigate who are members of the tattooed law enforcement gangs and disclose that information pursuant to Brady to people who are facing trial where tattooed law enforcement gang members are witnesses for the prosecution?
That part continues to be a work in progress. I just spoke about the click and subgroup policy portion of it. We are still working on tattoos and emblems as well, along with a lengthy list of other policies that our Office of Constitutional Policing is trying to get through the meet and confer process. I think I mentioned here, but sorry, I'm getting old, so I'm forgetting here, is that back in July, we got our use of force policy through. That was significant because especially our federal monitors up in the Antelope Valley were growing very impatient, as they should have. And we have got that published, although we're still in the process of implementing that. And there's one thing that I've identified in our department, which is great, is we lack training. So one of my biggest objectives is to push more and more training so that we professionalize our department even more and more. So I just wanted to throw that out as well. But those are still things that we're looking at.
Other questions or comments to the sheriff? Commissioner Johnson?
This commission issued a report 18 months ago about deputy gangs in LA Sheriff's Department going back 50 years. I know you've read that report and that you've been present for our continuing debate and references to that report. And I just wanted to note the 24 recommendations in that February 2023 report about the pervasiveness, the impacts on Angelenos of the deputy gang and hate group members in the department, including details about how deputy gang members participated in and obstructed investigation of the Kennedy Hall brawl 6 years ago this month here in Elysian Park. And I just wanted to ask if that report provided any reference to you throughout this lengthy negotiation process, and if, by my reckoning, maybe about 6 of the recommendations in that report are achieved in large measure by this newly announced policy, if that report will continue to be a reference to you in the negotiation for the deputy click policy and in the implementation of the policy that you unveiled and announced yesterday, because implementation, training, and ongoing efforts to regain public trust, as outlined in the new policy yesterday, can be fulfilled, which are the gist and the heart and soul of those remaining recommendations.
The answer simply is yes, absolutely. We listened to everything that all of you have recommended. Although you did say 6, I'm looking at a list here of 12 items that are either completed or well on its way to being completed. So the answer is yes. We've used it, and that's why I'm thanking all of you for being, you're part of this process. You're part of the process of making us move forward, and I appreciate you.
You know, with respect to that, if I could, and I know you indicated that the question of exclusionary subgroups or deputy clicks has been bifurcated, and so hopefully that process will move forward. I think you know my views, and I should say our views of this commission, and that is just prohibiting law enforcement gangs, which is required by state law that every law enforcement agency in the state of California must have a policy that prohibits law enforcement gangs as defined by state statute. That just doing that does not go far enough to eradicate the exclusionary subgroups like the executioners, the banditos, the regulators, the grim reapers. That needs a policy that clearly, in our view, clearly prohibits deputy clicks, as we've defined them in our report and recommendations with respect to deputy gangs, cliques, and exclusionary subgroups. So you have adopted, and we applaud that, recommendation A2 of this commission. That's one of our recommendations to prohibit law enforcement gangs, but we feel strongly that that you as sheriff should adopt the recommendation. It's A3, the third recommendation, which clearly prohibits participation or membership in deputy cliques like the banditos or executioners. That's really not a question. I know you said it's bifurcated, so I'm not even, I guess my question always would be a timing one. It took so long, Sheriff, to get the policy prohibiting law enforcement gangs within the Sheriff's Department. That policy now is in effect. Thanks. But I guess if I had a question, and I realize it's very difficult for you to prognosticate on this, but how long will it take to get a deputy click policy in place?
As long as it takes. I'm not giving up. That's the bottom line. I think I've made it very clear. One, I understand the concern. I have the same concerns that you do, but I have to abide by a meet and confer process. I've made that very clear in here. I cannot circumvent that portion. So for me to sit here and tell you it's going to take 30 days, I'm just giving ammunition to the attorneys on the other side that say that I am not following the process. So I'm not going to do that because I need a click and subgroup policy. That's what I've been working on, and I'm going to continue to work very hard to achieve that.
Well, thank you for that, Sheriff. Are there other questions or comments from other commissioners of
Patty.
Sheriff Patty, and then Mr. Arthur, Miss Giggins, I should say.
Sorry.
There you go.
Thank you, everyone. It's taken 8 years to get to today. I believe that's how long I've been on this commission, along with the inaugural commissioners. Is it 8? With
It'll be, our first meeting will be 8 years from now, this January.
Okay.
But we were all sworn in December of 2016, almost 8.
Right. And we became the Civilian Oversight Commission to a 100-year-old law enforcement agency that never had oversight. Civilian oversight is the way I understand it. And so as one of the inaugural commissioners, along with Commissioner Harris and Commissioner Bonner and Commissioner Kennedy, and then with the newer folks who have joined in some of the transitions, I feel like I am feeling extremely grateful that today has arrived, that we now have an anti-deputy gang policy. It's the state law, but now we have it as part of the personnel and practices. I believe it's going to go into effect in 30 days. And I'm just taking a moment to, when I heard about it yesterday, I was been reflecting on these past 8 years and the community groups and families and individuals who came before us. There was Youth Justice Coalition, Dignity Now, Dignity Now. And part of our role has been to be a bridge between the Sheriff's Department and the community. And we have these open forums for testimonies. And we've had our inquiries, and we've had 9 hearings on the deputy gang situation. So the way I'm feeling is this is kind of a significant moment. And I'm just feeling grateful. I'm feeling grateful to all of us, people who've been here before, the community that's still coming and paying attention, the community who has, the silence has been lifted. And this has not happened in a vacuum. This is 8 years of hard work and a lot of challenges. I mean, I wonder when my house was raided by a SWAT team, by the former sheriff, if there were not deputy gang members in my home and who took my car. That's just my experience, and I have heard heartfelt experiences from family members who've been intimidated and have lost loved ones and not knowing what's going on behind the scenes. So today, as much as we're not where we absolutely need to be, but we are going in the right direction. And I'm just feeling a lot of appreciation for the Inspector General and all that he has done, and his staff and his team has done, along with the COC, along with the support of the Board of Supervisors. This has taken so many people coming on board and entities coming on board who were saying you must transform. This has got to change. So it is changing. And I'm just hoping that we can all take a minute, because we have to keep going. You know, I've been involved in the anti-violence against women movement, violence prevention movements for, practically most of my life. And I think the only way that I've been able to stay engaged this long is that I like to look at the glass being half full. We can look at it half empty, and that's our preferences. But I like to look at it half full so we could keep going. So today I want to appreciate the Board of Supervisors who got engaged. And I think of former supervisors, Mark Ridley Thomas, former Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, current Supervisor Hilda Solis, who's been a champion of this. And I really want to appreciate our sheriff and the leadership of his department. You came here, Sheriff, and you said you were going to get this done. You couldn't give us a timetable, but you said you were going to get it done, and now you started to get it done. And I just hope that we can all just take a moment and feel some gratitude that the hard work and getting through the suffering that's gone on, that we are going in the right direction.
That's very worthwhile to do, Patty, and well said. And I would underscore the latter part, and that is that, I mean, we have to give credit where credit is due ultimately, and that is this would not have happened without Sheriff Luna and his perseverance to get a deputy gang policy in place. May not be enough, but he did that, and he needs to be applauded for that. Mr. Callaway, you had a comment or a question of the sheriff.
Yeah, I just wanted to get clarification that your comment on whether or not that the deputy gang situation, that the top priority to affect change is training. I just want to make sure that I understood that that was the actual priority, or if you meant something else by that, because I haven't been alive that long, but gangs is bad. So I don't know what training would actually help.
It's a good question.
There's a lot of factors in impacting the challenges that we've encountered that are well documented. Obviously, good, strong policy. Training is a very important aspect. Accountability is another very important aspect of it. Staffing. I wish I had more time. There is a lengthy list of things amongst just strong leadership and expectations, and holding people to account that this behavior is 100% unacceptable. And by the way, welcome to the commission, sir. But as I've spoken in the past, we have cases that we have investigated. There are cases where we've disciplined employees. We have a new system where, well, you're promoting, it is part of the process. So it is very much in the process of being institutionalized. So there's a mind shift of where we're going. So now it's not just about training, but training is a significant aspect of it, because that is one of my objectives, is to improve the training all the way across the board for members of our department. And it's very much needed.
Understood. I appreciate that. And thank you for saying, welcome and such. But I definitely think from my perspective, I would love, in the future, obviously not right now because you have a short timeline, the accountability part is really the one that I would like to hear more of versus, the training part. So just the high level hits, I would like to hear that.
Yes, sir.
And just one brief follow-up on that point. You mentioned the importance of the two-captain model at the 3 stations where it's been implemented. I would just note that the 3 stations where that has been implemented have been documented as having a particularly fierce deputy gang problem over the years. And I just wanted to ask, given the added capacity and the review of past cases and conduct that you mentioned earlier, do you believe that the two-captain model at those stations will assist in rooting out and in implementing the kind of accountability that is highlighted in our report and is mentioned in the new policy yesterday?
Yes, I absolutely support that two-captain model. I believe it's working, and it's even going to get better as time goes on, just because there is more eyes on specific incidences that need to be reviewed. Again, I'm not saying we're there yet. We're getting better every week.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
I'd like to, excuse me. Yes. I know.
I just wanted to comment to the
last question, Sheriff.
It's not so much a question, so much as a comment. As a lifelong born and raised LA County resident, I think this has been a historic moment in time, from county board leadership, sheriff leadership, because if I recall, and having had a father who was a deputy probation for over 35 years, and his engagement in advocacy for people in the community, I'll never forget the 1970 Chicano moratorium event, and growing up and see his engagement and advocacy towards board, leaders and his own union. So to the point that we're at today, and what that reverberations will be with under your department as an elected leader moving forward, I believe it's going to impact culture. It's going to impact systems and change, but that takes time. And that's what I'm hopeful for. And much to Commissioner Giggins' comments, it's a change, and it's implemented, and the voters, I think, are going to see it. And I just wanted to thank you for the leadership and the push and getting it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. We know you have to be across town, I think, at 11. So What we're going to do now is we're going to complete item 7, then we'll take public comment. But the last item we have under agenda item 7 is the report of the executive director. Ms. Mosley.
Thank you, Chair Bonner. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Also, thank you to our new leadership for stepping up into these important roles on this commission, Commissioner Johnson and Garcia, and also Chair Bonner. Also, welcome to Commissioner Arthur Callaway from AV. Oh. Sorry, there's something flying around here. So if y'all see me doing that. We also have 2 new liaisons from County Council's office since Amara Kirby is now working for OIG. So let us welcome also Senior Deputy Counsels Jensen Diaz and Matthew Dill. They're on the end down there. Do y'all have any words that y'all might want to say? Speak into the mic, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And then also thank you, and I know he just left, to Sheriff Luna for his leadership and moving the department forward with a first step towards eradicating deputy gangs in LASD and our deputy gangs, and ad hoc committee members and OIG for their continued efforts, time, and patience on this recommendation. While this is a huge milestone for everyone, we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and we acknowledge that. So let's continue to move forward collaboratively to obtain needed reform and change within LASD. Although we were dark last month, that did not slow down our work, thanks to Chair Bonner and his leadership. So in addition to Chair Bonner working hard with the governance committee to revise 3.79, which also included numerous meetings with various stakeholders and the drafting of several memos which are linked to this agenda. Commissioners also attended some of our interviews to fill 2 positions within our office and LASD Academy graduations. Staff diligently worked with our ad hoc committees on several motions made by the supervisors. We are also preparing for next week's joint meeting with the Civil Brand Commission. Staff conducted site visits of the jail facilities. We participated in meetings with LASD and community members, coordinated a panel on law enforcement gangs for a panel session at NACO's conference in October. We are coordinating our 4th annual Civilian Oversight Conference that is taking place at Magic Johnson Park on November 8th. This will be an opportunity to bring in different oversight entities in California, as well as our members, as well as partners with various oversight entities, legal partners, community members, and law enforcement to share information and experiences. It is also crucial in understanding how we can get effective oversight here in Los Angeles that will be beneficial for everyone, including LASD. This conference will be open to the public, so we encourage public participation. Commissioners and staff participated in an LASD canine training a couple of weeks ago. Demonstrations were canceled due to the hot weather, but the classroom presentation was very informative. We learned a lot about the various breeds of dogs used in LASD and in what areas, and also how are they imported, what is the discipline process for canines and their handlers. I can't stress enough how important it is for oversight bodies and the public to proactively learn about law enforcement policies, procedures, and training. The next item I wanted to talk about and highlight is staffing. We are back to a staff of 6 with 1 on leave, and we are also filling 2 vacancies. And that's great news as we have a lot of things going on. Our community specialist coordinator, Robert Flores, will begin on September 30th. We are excited to have him join our team and are looking forward to the creation of our strategic plan that include best practices to build trust between our communities and LASD. We are also at the end stage of the hiring of our communications manager. Yes, I'm excited about that too. We have a lot going on, especially with the branding of our unit. Hopefully that will happen by the end of this month. In addition to as-needed site visits, our current staff are continuing to attend CAC meetings in Palmdale, Century, Compton, Lancaster, Diamond Bar, Altadena, and community events such as Parks After Dark and Florence Firestone meetings. We are also working on developing our training academy for the onboarding of new commissioners. This is on the commission strategic plan, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Currently, after commissioners are appointed, they receive an orientation from HR. They are also given access to the HR training system, where there are several LASD internal operation videos for the commissioners to watch. Also, staff is working with LASD to update those videos. I believe that they are sort of outdated. So staff is working on that. We requested, I also want to look into trainings on LASD's policies and procedures for our commissioners. The manual is available online, but it's easier to have that access as well as training on policies and procedures that deputies use often. On our list of upcoming events, we are invited to attend an LASD Hispanic Heritage Month event that's scheduled for October 3rd. That's going to be from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Hall of Justice. We were also invited to attend the Taste of Soul community event on Saturday, October 19th. Staff will be tabling that event. On September 25th at 9:30, Chair Bonner and I will attend the Public Safety Cluster meeting to update the Justice deputies on the work and activities of the commission. I think at that time also we'll be able to update them on the proposed revised revisions to 3.79. My next item I'm going to focus on is the internal commission operations. My work with county council staff regarding legal billing to the COC is continuing. We last identified that they were going to reimburse COC's budget for items that were inadvertently applied to COC's budget. Fiscal services and the EO are aware of the need for a line item in the commission's budget for legal services. Lastly, for internal operations in between other priority tasks, staff is continuing to work on the creation of a day-to-day operations manual, which would include, which would be able to use, we will use as a resource when our staff is undergoing staffing transitions. Staff also revised the commission selection process for community vacancies on the commission. We will forward the draft to the Rules of Governance, I mean, I say rules, but Governance Ad Hoc Committee. Our Deputy ED Bakila is working on a complaint process for us, and he's also reviewing the draft annual report. As mentioned at our meeting in July, I would like to see statistical data in our reports as far as the complaints that's coming into our office, what's happening to those complaints, and also capturing the demographics, where they're coming from also. And I want to be able to see that in our annual report. We don't have any statistical data in our reports. And as our new hires come on board, I expect the report to become more robust. County mandatory trainings. Lastly, commissioners must complete the county's mandatory trainings. Thanks to Commissioner Kennedy, the disaster service worker training was removed from the list of commissioner assigned trainings. So thank you. Last item in my update report is the commission strategic plan. We've had this item on our agenda the last few meetings of our commission as a check-in as to look at where we were in our goals and objectives, but we've had to keep moving it to future meetings based on the priorities on our agenda. We identified 3 goals as priorities for this year, with the understanding that some of our objectives will carry over to 2025. The good news is we are making progress with our goal to strengthen civilian oversight in LA County, so we are effective and can be viewed as a national model. In regard to our goal to build relationships with community members through our meetings and attending events to receive community feedback, we have done the best we could with the decrease in staff size. And now, since our new community engagement specialist will start in a couple of weeks, and our comms manager position will follow, I anticipate us meeting most of the objectives for this goal. In the meantime, I would recommend sending our plan, strategic plan, to the governance committee to discuss any necessary updates, revisions prior to it going to the commission as an update discussion item, most likely for October and November of this year. And this completes my report. So please let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. First of all, the governance committee will undertake that review as well as the taking a look at the a manual for procedures for this commission. Let me just say, you and your staff have been very busy. That's clear. So we thank you for your work on behalf of the commission, Ms. Mosley, and our staff. Do we have public comment on item 7, which were the various reports by both the commission and by the sheriff?
We have 3 public comments on this agenda item in person. We have Raquel Derfler.
Good morning. Good morning again. I wanted to speak to the whole 2 captain at each station. Like, this is a lovely thing. Actually, it's not. It's cooler in theory than in actuality. So you have to understand that both Lancaster and Palmdale stations have a 2 captain system now, but it's out of the Lancaster station that the harassment of the Nunez family is continuing. The reason being is it's the gang unit that's harassing the Nunez family and witnesses. So technically, Captain Bartlett and Captain Fender don't have, basically, they're not the superior of the individuals doing the harassment. So they literally came into the alleyway looking for this witness. I will not say their name. They did not come here because they are afraid for their safety. But this past week, it was actually Lieutenant Waters, who is the supervisor of Detective White, who came looking for this witness, knocking on doors. The aunt came out, who lives next door, and says the witness does not live there any longer. They told her that they're going to keep showing up and looking for her. They left the complaint that was filed on behalf of this witness for the harassment, like the freaking Gestapo, like what's that about? And telling the aunt that they will continue to come back until they find this witness. Why do they want this witness? Because this is the only witness that's left to actually speak up about what they saw in the alley the evening that there was contact with Francisco Nunez. Everyone else has been knocked out. We have the gentleman that's in custody at Pitches. They did a probation raid at his grandmother's house, knocked the door down. He's in custody. You don't need to do a probation check. The other young gentleman that was arrested and released now has federal gun charges on him. So everyone is being picked off and silenced one by one, except for this one remaining witness that they're super excited and want to find them. But why? Why do you had no interest in finding them earlier, except now when they're speaking out about what happened to Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you. The next in-person public comment is T. Carter.
Hi, good afternoon, I would say it is. So in directing most of my comments to, I would say it was Ms. Mosley and Mr. Kennedy. The last time I was at one of these meetings, I brought to you a copy of a unresolved disposition that was given to me by the sheriff department after they locked me up with ankle chains, waist chains, and handcuffs from being locked up from 6 a.m. in the morning, go to court, go into the courtroom, tell the judge I cannot use the restroom. She says it's up to the sheriff department. I filed so many complaints about this. They did it 3 different times. I would leave CCP court. They'll bring me out from court 6 a.m., lock me up. Everyone else on the bus, because their case was not sheriff related, their waist restraints were taken off. They would put me in a cell, pour it, laugh, lock the door. I would go into court, come back out. Then when they take me to CCB, they would leave me in the holding tank and say, I need to learn a lesson about filing complaints against sheriff deputies. Don't take me up until about 11 p.m. So each time I went to court, I endured cruel unusual punishment. The disposition by the sheriff department, which I provided a copy to Mrs. Mosley and Kennedy, prior to your update, which I have not heard anything about my update since I last spoke to you, and this reporting that you've done or had someone else to do, it says the sheriff department says my matter is unresolved. I then filed a complaint against the inspector general, who everyone has this big relationship with. No one has responded to my complaint. I asked the inspector to forward a copy of this when I got this to all of you. He told me he doesn't have to. That's the end of the complaint. So I don't know whose side he's on as far as his job duties, but it's very alarming that I also filed a complaint against him. And this is supposed to be about ethics. And the person that's overseeing the complaint is not interested in forwarding something that says unresolved when they have all of the resources to look into this matter. And I didn't ask him to force the sheriff department to say anything. I wanted the board to get a copy so they can do a follow-up. Then on court transcripts, it also says that on both occasions, the judge says it's up to the sheriff department
Thank
regarding
you.
restraint. So
Thank you.
I never got a response, nor did I
Thank
hear.
you, Mr. Carter. Next public comment. Next public comment, we have Jung Park.
Thank you, fellow commissioners. Dear the chair Bonners, my name is Jung Park, and I'm here for behalf of my families. We have been living in the Delaware community since 2021. I'm here to today talk about the serious problem with our base over the past 3 years, including misconduct, retaliations, and intimidation of the South LA sheriff stations. Our neighborhood operates an illegal short-term rental, which has caused a constant problem for us, and shared driveway between us, the home, has been blocked ongoing, leading on tensions. The community leaders and job government has sided with our neighbors, and he influence over sheriff's department has made it difficult for us to receive a fair treatment. On June 28, 2022, Sergeant Rojas abused authority and violates our property rights by help us and neighbors file a trespass violation against us on our own property. This was done without properly investigating situation and by misinterpreting his own law. And then LA sheriff stations routinely ignoring our complaints many times, prolonged responding our calls. It's been going on for 3 years, and then we ended up going to the courts, and then still unresolved. I'm asking the commissions investigating South Los Angeles Sheriff Station and then hold reasonable for the misconduct accountable. Our family deserve to live in peace, free from illegal activities, and without our fears from those who are
Thank
supposed
you.
to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment is from Vanessa Perez.
I'm the mother of Joseph Perez. I want to say it's good that Sheriff Luna is doing this policy, deputy gangs, but how are we supposed to go any further when he's already promoted his captains to chiefs? And how are we supposed to go any further? The captain, Bobby Wick of Industry Station, has been promoted to Century City now to a chief. So how are we supposed to get any type of justice or any accountability from these supervisors or these head of chiefs if they're already up there? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment is from Ali Rubenfield.
Good morning, Ali Rubenfeld with the Loyola Anti-Racism Center and Check the Sheriff. And we're all grateful this policy exists. 3 years seems like a very long time for something that minimally complies with state law. It's also very concerning that the COC and the OIG were both boxed out of the meet and confer process. you're here to make sure that community interests are involved and that ALADS doesn't control what the sheriff department does. And it's hard to have confidence in that when you're not allowed in the room. I do have a question. This policy to me just seems like it's only going to be as effective as the power to investigate is. So I don't understand if there's going to be a proactive mechanism for investigating existing deputy gang members, or if this is only going to be reactive. Because if it's only going to come up when we see things like the industry Indians beating up teenagers in a bowling alley parking lot, it's not going to work. There needs to be a proactive investigation to uproot and remove members of deputy gangs from this department. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 online public comments. First is Benny Adrian. Benny, you have been unmuted.
Hello, and thank you again. With regards to the comments just made, I'd like to just echo those. Aside from it, there were excuses put forward, and that came in the form of the training. It's a manner of not being accountable. They're going to introduce new trainings, I'm sure. They're generating the training now, but they've had years to come up with it to just put it into action as soon as this policy went into play. They could have been preparing everybody to form up into a classroom this morning, last evening, started asking questions, started making sure everybody was well trained, or to continue the training, but the point is it's all just a diversion. At least that's what it seems like on the surface to me in my experiences in the Marine Corps, and how a lot of the training that they have there is redundant. It's yearly, and it's as a reminder, because we already know the rules there and we're held to like this ridiculous standard. The problem is there's like a very big discrepancy when you consider military and law enforcement because of where they stand, but also the amount of pay and investment by taxpayers. So we're talking about investing taxpayer money into training that's meant to just be unaccountable. That's all I'd have to add. Look into the training, because if you're not approving it, I think what you're going to get is a whole lot of nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment is from Carlos Montes. Carlos, you have been unmuted.
Yes, good morning. This is Carlos Montes again, longtime Chicano rights activist, a member of Centro CSO Community Service Organization. We work with families who have been impacted by police violence. One of the things about the deputy gangs, I strongly believe they need to be fired and prosecuted. That's going to solve the problem, right? In terms of the training that Luna pointed out, I didn't hear much about de-escalation. I live in Bull Heights. In 2016, we had 5 young men, 2 teenagers killed by the LAPD. We did protests almost every month. We finally got rid of Martin Baeza, who was the captain, and they brought in Al Labrada. You probably heard that name, LAPD. He right away did de-escalation, beanbags, taser guns, billy club, right? Which we don't like the brutality, but at least it knocked down the killing significantly within 1 year. So, I want to hear more about de-escalation from Luna. And also I want to commend the report by your executive director, Ms. Mosley. Thank you very much. You're doing a lot of good work. I would continue to urge you to go out in the community, come out to East LA. We have a lot of great events. We'd like to meet you in person and introduce you to some of the community events that we have. We have a great high school, Garfield High School, Roosevelt. We're going to have the Big East LA Classic at the Soy 5. Maybe we should come out and do a table, and I look forward to hear more about you mentioned something about a complaint process. I'd like to get more information on that. So keep up the good work. We got to, this is a big problem we're dealing with. So thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Our next online public comment is from Paloma Cerna. Paloma, you've been unmuted.
My name is Paloma Serna. I am with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the Saving Lives in Custody of California. I'm also the mother of Elisa Serna, who died in San Diego County Jail in November 11th, 2019. And so hearing the sheriff talk about training, I do question what type of training is he looking at. You know, in San Diego, the sheriff, Kelly Martinez, has to now train because of our civil settlement, is that she has to train her sheriff to a compassion. And that's sad that you have to teach, train individual how to have compassion for a human being. And also too, I would like to know about if there will be something announced on the website, your guys' website, regarding the November event, regarding other oversight agency coming together. Will you have that online and a flyer or something? So I really do appreciate if I could get that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment is Sol Marquez. You have been unmuted.
Good morning. My name is Sol Marquez, and I'm joining today from Centro CSO in Boyle Heights. Sheriff Luna, we heard from him, and he stated that, you know, in his report that crime was down, and so are the deaths caused by deputies. And he also said that he wanted officer-involved shootings to stop, just like we do. But I am hearing that firing seems to be the final ultimatum for those that are caught being inside of deputy gangs. And yes, we can celebrate the 3 years, after 3 years, that it's officially on paper that deputy gangs are now, you know, really being hammered on. But in order to win justice for David Ordaz Jr., Anthony Daniel Vargas, Edwin Rodriguez, Paul Rea, and many others, we need to actually clean house. Buta Banditos out of East Los Angeles and all gangs from all stations. It's a good thing that we're here today gathered to try to make this happen. I am with also Check the Sheriffs, and we will hope to keep fighting so that all deputy gangs are removed from all stations. It's ridiculous that this is where we are. We are a scandal nationally, and I hope that, you know, we can come together as a community, as those who are affected, to make sure that all deputy gangs are removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last in-person comment is from Young Park.
Good morning. I'm sorry. I would like to speak about injustice factor over the past 5 years with the South LA Sheriff Station, but interpreter is not available today. Please give me the opportunity to come back to next month for preparation. So we lost it a lot of civic meter and then criminal meter, and then with the sheriff involved, harassment of my family, 5 years. I lost it my main house, 5 years. We couldn't use that, and with that time, my son has dizzy, and then we couldn't go to the emergency, and then we never used the easement, and with Sergeant Rojo, that's my right. They blocked it. They made the county jail. As we call the county jail. It's not. It's already LA County hearing officer denied it illegally. Make the high wall and then blocked the easement driveway. We never used the 5 years my Oka garage. And then that issue I want to talking to and report this time, but I cannot explain to very well. I need interpreter next time, next month, please. And then it's very important my life and then my criminal case. I don't know why they dropped it. statute limitation is more import finger cutting and then racial slit. I don't know my TA why they drafted more import racial slut only that criminal case. I don't understand.
Thank you. There are no further public comments on this item, Chair.
All right, and we're going to stand in recess, take our morning break, and we'll resume at 11:15 a.m. Thank you. We're in recess. Is Max actually going to give the 15 minutes? You know? We have a lot more on the agenda, so let's everybody resume their seats and we'll get started.
Extra long break.
Yeah, about 5 minutes extra, which is almost always the slippage. All right, let's go back on the record. I think we've now reached item 8 on the agenda? Need to get my agenda out here. Here it is.
Item 8 is unfinished business.
Oh, yes, there is no unfinished business. That's item 8. New business, there's no, when I say there's no unfinished business, I think that's a term of art. We have lots more we need to accomplish, but no formal unfinished business. So there's no new business to take up. So that takes us to the ad hoc committee and agency reports and updates. And we're going to start off with a report of the Inspector General's office with respect to its quarterly report on reform and oversight efforts of the Sheriff's Department from April 24 to June 2024, a 3-month period. And I believe Mr. Huntsman is not giving this. Who do we have from the Office of Inspector General? Oh, Peter. Peter, are you going to be doing this report?
Yes, Commissioner.
All right, so it's been attached to the agenda, so hopefully you can just summarize the highlights for us, because I'm a little bit concerned about our timing here in terms of trying to complete all of the agenda items. But go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just briefly summarize what the quarterly report contains and be available for any questions commissioners have. Again, Peter Biebring from the Office of Inspector General. I'm an Assistant Inspector General there. So this quarterly report obviously contains our usual standard sections in the department operations section. We're calling attention to the new section that is a recurring section on TASER policy. The department completed its TASER policy, finalized it after this quarter, so we will be examining the substance of that policy in our next quarterly report. But it examines some of the data reporting, reports on some of the data reporting the department has now made available on its dashboard. There is a special section in the department operations section on a particular investigation, an ICIB and IAB investigation into allegations of department sworn employees' involvement in an illegal gambling operation, which raises concerns about the department's investigative process that have previously been identified, failures of the investigation to examine all available leads, particularly around the financial records of the employee at issue, and the failure of the investigation to pursue potential false statements. That's worth the commission's attention. In the custody section, there are 3 separate special sections. One that addresses attorney and professional visitor access, and kind of the top line summary there is in reviewing policies on attorney and visitor access in the wake of complaints that several attorneys and legal clinics were not allowed full access to attorney visitation rooms, even pursuant to, or attorney visitation or services visitation, like investigators, even pursuant to court orders. We identified just inconsistencies. Most of those orders governing attorney visiting are facility dependent. So the standards for what is required, what visitors need to show to prove that they are entitled to attorney access or professional visitor access depends on the facility. And we have some recommendations for standardizing those across the department and making them clear so that they are followed. The quarterly report also addresses 2 issues around in custody around CRDF. One, out of cell time. There's an audit of out of cell time at CRDF that identifies, again, although the department has a policy that at CRDF that will allow more out of cell time than state law than Title 15 requires. We identified instances where it's not always followed and the failure to follow that policy is not always documented. The department has issued a directive subsequent to that audit that would, at least on paper, address some of those concerns by not only increasing out of cell time provided, but also requiring supervisors to audit out of cell time. And it is just incumbent on the department to ensure that that directive is followed and enforced. The last special section concerns issues related to pregnant people housed at CRDF. The section examines provision of water, additional water rations, which the department does provide, and we found the department does consistently provide, and labor bonding time, postpartum bonding time, which again, we found the department provided for the 3 people who gave birth during the audit period. We looked at out of cell time specifically for pregnant people, given the importance of large muscle exercise. And one of the concerns a special section identifies is that additional large muscle exercise time for pregnant people was often provided very early in the morning, so that people were forced to choose between sleep, which is also important for pregnant people, and large muscle exercise. Those concerns may be addressed by the directive of out of cell time that applies across CRDF. But again, it's incumbent on the department to ensure that those are followed. In the one issue that I will flag for the commission's attention in the regular reporting on custody, in the in-custody deaths, we identified that 2 of the deaths occurred at Module 1400 in CRDF, which is a medical intake module at which is used to identify and conduct intake on people with medical issues, including detox. There have been 4 deaths at that intake unit in the past 2 years. There have been no deaths at the similar intake unit at IRC. And so that's an issue that we wanted to flag for the public, the board, and the commission. And I'm available for any questions.
All right, are there questions or comments to Mr. Biebring of the Office Inspector General from the commission?
Yes.
Yeah, once.
Are you aware of any penalties for any members of the department who might seek to access incarcerated people under the false guise as serving as counsel? Because one of the important allegations coming from the Nunez family involving Lancaster is that 2 members of the department falsely characterized themselves as counsel and used that ruse to gain access to someone at the Pitches Detention Center. I'm just curious if there might be any penalties or any discipline that might be available in cases of such deliberate use of deception.
I'm not specifically aware of those allegations, and I think I hate to give the answer of it depends, but I think I would have to look at exactly who the deception was aimed at. That's something our office could potentially look into, certainly.
Is there any evidence of a pattern of such treatment, given your examination of access of incarcerated people to counsel and protections for it? Is there any, have you detected any previous evidence of that tactic being used?
Our examination of this did not, but didn't address that issue. So I want to be careful to say we were not looking for that. What we were looking for, following complaints that by attorneys in legal clinics, that they were not getting access, even when ordered by a court. We looked and we did a review looking primarily at the policies for access. So we were not looking at specific cases, and we certainly weren't where people were denied access, and we certainly weren't looking for specific instances where people were improperly granted access because they were pretending to be counsel.
Let me see if I could clarify that a little bit, just in my own mind. But in terms of looking at in custody deaths, did you take a look at and review the death review reports that the IG actually participates on with respect to the people that died in custody for this quarterly or 3-month period?
Yes. So what I was referring to earlier is the special section the regular section that we include in every quarterly report on in custody deaths that is based on our office's participation in the in custody death reviews and walkthroughs, identified 2 of those deaths in that particular module. So that was a notable pattern, at least in a pattern of 2.
When you say that particular module, what do you mean by module?
Module 1400 at CRDF, which is a medical intake facility at CRDF.
When you review death reports, review reports, when the IG does that, the OAG, does that include deaths that occur at lockups at patrol stations?
Yes, that would include deaths that occur at lockups.
And did your report include the in custody death of Mr. Youngblood? I believe he was arrested in Lancaster area, and he was he died apparently. I mean, apparently these, from what I've heard, maybe shortly after that arrest, maybe a few hours after that arrest, in custody at the Lancaster lockup. Is that one of the cases that you looked at?
I'm not specifically sure if that case is one that we examined for this quarterly report. I would have to get back to you on that.
You know, I'm wondering if we ask the IG, I say this because at our October meeting, I expect some of the next of kin of Mr. Youngblood are going to be here, and they're saying, I mean, that they haven't been informed at all about the circumstances with respect to his death. I don't know whether that's the case or not. Obviously, we haven't even heard from them, but it would be nice at the October meeting if the IG would take a look at that particular one and make sure that it was thoroughly and adequately investigated, and that we understand the circumstances to the extent you can report them to us of how he died. Okay. Any other questions or comments for the Inspector General? I don't see any. Let's move on to the reports of the various ad hoc committees of the Oversight Commission. I think, as most of you know, a lot of the work of the commission actually takes place through our ad hoc committees. The first ad hoc committee is the Deputy Gang Ad Hoc, and I think we actually pretty much reported on that, Sean, didn't we? That is that. Why don't you just briefly recap?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just to remind everyone, the Deputy Gang and Click Ad Hoc Committee is going to resume special hearings on deputy gangs on Friday, October 11th at 9 a.m. at our usual spot in the Robinson Moot Courtroom at Loyola Law School, not far from here. And the topic will explore the connection between the disbanded and controversial civil rights and public corruption detail that investigated oversight officials. And we're going to explore the connection between that detail and deputy gangs in the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you for that report, and we look forward to the special hearing of the Oversight Commission. The disciplinary process, I'm the lead of that, and there's nothing new to report. We're still working on a draft report and recommendations to submit to the Sheriff's Department. The Quality of Life Ad Hoc, Luis, do you have a report?
Yes. Quality of Life updates are Executive Director Charmaine Mosley and Principal Staff Analyst Tracy Jordan attended the July 30th Board of Supervisors meeting and were available at the pleasure of the board for verbal report from the commission on the July 9th, 2024 board motion titled Community Safety Updates on Addressing Illegal Street Takeovers, Sideshows, and Street Races. The commission also received the Q2 report on street takeovers from LAST, which is attached to today's agenda. The review of staff wellness and suicide prevention within LASD is also ongoing, and we are currently collaborating with NACO in the development of a webinar titled Examining Law Enforcement Wellness and Suicide Prevention Needs to Increase Public Safety.
Thank you, Luis. Any questions of Luis? I see none. The next report is the governance ad hoc. Of course, we covered the big item there, which was the revisions, proposed revisions to Chapter 3.79. But let me also say that the governance ad hoc will begin a process of drafting internal procedures for the Oversight Commission, which we've never had, and updating the COC handbook. And we'll turn now to the conditions of confinement ad hoc, and Irma's not here, and she is the lead of that. But Luis or Charmaine, can you give us the report of the conditions of confinement ad hoc? Luis, are you in a position to do that?
I don't have any updates.
Okay. Do you have any, Charmaine?
Excuse me, Chair. Commissioner Giggins is actually going to give the update on that.
Okay. Patty?
Yes, this is actually notes from the Chair Cooper. Here today. The ad hoc met on September 12th to discuss the various board motions, and the director, Charmaine Mosley, and principal staff analyst, Tracy Jordan, attended the July 30th Board of Supervisors meeting to be available to give any kind of verbal reporting from the commission on the June 25th, 2024 board motion titled Report on Conditions at Men's Central Jail. In addition, the staff visited Century Regional Detention Center, CRDF, the LASD Correctional Treatment Facility, the South LA and Industry Sheriff's Stations to be able to comply with the June 25th board motion titled Dignity and Health for People Who Are Incarcerated, Ensuring Accessibility to Menstrual Products in the Los Angeles County Jails, Probation Detention Facilities, Patrol Lockups, and Court Holding Tanks. And from the meeting that we had, it seems that for the most part, these materials and sanitary materials are available for the most part. There's a few places where they need to step that up a little bit, but there seems to be some compliance in that area for the inmates.
Could I ask, I guess I'll ask Tracy Besturdum, were there any problems accessing the CRDF? I mean, members of the commission staff?
The staff that did the actual on-site visit did not have any problems accessing the facility and or going in to check and communicate with staff and or the persons that were incarcerated.
Thank you. Appreciate hearing that. I think that takes us to the PREA ad hoc committee. And Hans, are you going to give us the report from the PREA ad hoc?
Yes, the commission received a response to our staff report from April of this year, and we requested follow-up materials from the Sheriff's Department, which we also received, and that material has been appended to today's agenda. So that report is part of the official agenda available online.
All right. I have one thing I'll add to that, but I also see you're on for you lead the technology committee as well, so perhaps we could take your report on that.
Sure. We received at the commission the revised LASD policy on conducted energy weapons, otherwise known as tasers, CEW being the operative acronym, and the revised policy on unmanned aircraft systems, or UAS in the parlance of the Sheriff's Department. And both of those policies in some ways responsive to and advised by our own commission reports on those issues, have been attached to this month's agenda.
I wanted to report basically on the use of force, and Sean has had to leave, so I'm going to report on that. And also, this touches on PREA, but it's something we skipped over on the agenda, and I think it's really very important. And that is that between our last meeting in July and today, we on behalf of the ad hoc committees for use of force and the PREA ad hoc, I signed and request to review and to access confidential documents, specific requests to the Sheriff's Department. And I'll just say what they are. Number one was, as some of you may know, there was an incident in which an innocent bystander named Rosa Ramirez was bitten by a canine. We've, of course, requested a review of policies with respect to canines. We are starting that process. But we specifically requested of the Sheriff's Department that they provide us with what's called the Executive Force Review Report of the dog bite incident of Ms. Ramirez. And we've gotten a response back that until County Council actually approves our receipt of that, the ad hoc committee's receipt of that confidential information, they consider it to be confidential, the use of force review report. They're not going to provide it to us. So if they get a clearance from County Council, they will, but they're telling us basically to pound sand on that request. So we also requested, and you may remember, I know some of you were at our July meeting, but if you may remember that it came up during that meeting that there were 18 in custody deaths in the county jails up till July anyway of this year. And as a consequence of that, the use of force ad hoc committee requested me as chair to issue a request to review certain documents, and that was to review the death review reports for those 18 in custody deaths. That request to the Sheriff's Department has also been denied because until and unless County Council says that under the memorandum of understanding that we submitted several months earlier to the Sheriff's Department, unless County Council approves it, they are not providing us with death review reports. And as you also heard, I'll just parenthetically note, if you were here last week, and in July at our last meeting, the Office of the Inspector General made it very clear that they cannot provide these because they have confidential information. So this gets back to one of the points that we're trying to rectify in the revisions to 3.79. But I'm going to mention the third request. And the third request was, and if you were here in July, you may remember that there was a report, a PREA report, and a good report by the Sheriff's Department, but it indicated that there were at least within the last year, there were 6 unsubstantiated allegations in which inmates or incarcerated persons had indicated some allegation of sexual misconduct or something that would violate PREA. So we made a modest request based upon that. We just said we would like to see just those 6 reports. They can redact names if they want to. We wanted to see those just 6 reports to satisfy ourselves that those allegations were investigated and that an unsubstantiated finding was appropriate. And if it wasn't, of course, we would want to take that up with the Sheriff's Department. That request, that's the third, if you will, request to review or access confidential information that we made since our last meeting. That request, of course, was also denied in the same letter by the Sheriff's Department, saying that basically, in substance, that they're consulting with County Council, but until County Council says that it's okay for them to share confidential information with members of the ad hoc committees that are responsible actually for overseeing with this commission, the Sheriff's Department, that they're not going to provide those to us. So I just wanted to make a record on that. I'm concerned about it, but it also ties in with if the Board of Supervisors does support our revisions to 3.79, then that's problem will be removed.
It's also just worth noting, just for the record and for the value of people who have taken the time to be here today, some at great expense coming from the Antelope Valley in particular, that the problem of not providing information to this commission also continues to feed and to fuel a pattern of claiming that substantive, factual, evidenced allegations continue to be treated as allegations instead of as fact-based occurrences, because we are not granted the evidence and access to the information that would allow to dispute that repeated characterization of public and civilian arguments about what they are experiencing and what is transpiring in their communities. And I just want to note that the assertion that only when it comes from the sheriff's department itself is something objective, which is itself a troubling allegation and flies in the face of any transparency, but that this is essential. The work that you are undertaking and that you're reporting on, Rob, and the work of this commission is essential to breaking down that barrier to sunlight and to transparency in the operations of the department.
Yeah, the request for these documents, access to these confidential documents, I believe, are attached to the agenda. Any other comments or questions from members of the commission before we move on? Thank you for that comment, Hans. Okay, so do we have any public comment on this before we move on to the presentations?
Yes, we have 3 public comments on this item. The first is Cassandra Hernandez.
"189 days since Francisco Nunez was murdered, kidnapped, and tortured by Lancaster Sheriff's Department, a cherished uncle, brother, son, father, and friend. On day 182, we celebrated his birthday without Francisco Nunez. The amount of pain that he couldn't be here to celebrate with us because of killer deputies. Francisco loved his birthday. He enjoyed celebrating with his family and friends. He would have turned 39. On 189 days of no justice, 189 days of harassment, 189 days of evidence being tampered with, 189 days of reports not matching, 189 days of grief. If we're being realistic, what family can properly grieve their loved one when we have no justice, when cops keep intimidating us, intimidating the people that was last seen with Francisco, and even shooting one of the last individuals that was with him? As I stand coming to every meeting praying that somebody will make a change, I hear a lot of talking and understanding. I need actions. Where is the change? How is that innocent lives remain being killed by killer cops, deputy gangs, and how is that footage can never be found? How is it that us citizens have to obey a law that your own sheriffs can't obey? How is it that someone incompetent like Luna is still in charge, making inappropriate comments to a grieving family, to someone who can't control his deputies from killing, his deputies from intimidating? That's fine, because guess what? We will ring that bell. We all stand here as a family, as a community, to demand justice. We all unite together to represent. You can't keep killing us. You can't keep hiding from the disgrace of a badge. You can't keep covering up our loved ones you killed. You won't get away with it. We stand here to tell our story that your system failed to keep attempting to cover up. You're not bringing us down. You already did the worst thing to a human: murder, torture, and kidnap. And let's not forget the threat said by your deputy member. Are we keeping a G? Keep a G. Police have killed 921 people in the U.S. so far in 2024. Let that sink in. That could be any one of your family members. Is that what you stand by? Will this always be the new normal?
Thank you. Next public comment.
Now, are there any more comments on the ad hoc committee reports? Because hopefully we want to make sure there's a chance for general comment later, but are there any other that are relevant to the ad hoc committee reports? Jordan?
We have Vanessa Perez signed up for this item. Are you speaking on this item? Okay.
The items, the ad hoc committee reports that you just heard.
We also have T. Carter signed up for this item.
Yes, Mr. Carter.
Yes, this is in response to the IG report. So I was told when I presented my matter by the IG, who is not here right now, he told me, as it stated, that it was unresolved by the sheriff department. He could do anything further. But by this person's, I don't know if his name is Robert Bonner, he just stated that they sent, after they got a disposition regarding a matter, they sent a request for further information. So when I asked for my matter to be sent for further information, I was told by the IG that that cannot be done, that it stops there. So you just admitted here on the record that your office did sent something furtherance of another investigation and similar to what I asked for. So I would like to request the commission to have a hearing on maybe replacing the Inspector General himself and have other citizens to come in to give their experiences based upon that, because you just admitted that your office sent something in furtherance of a complaint based upon a disposition that you thought there could be a discrepancy. But when I presented mine, I was told it stopped there. So you just admitted that something more could have been done at my end. Now, when you guys sent that over, you said it goes to county council and it stopped there. That's all I wanted. My matter to be sent and documented to go through all the chain of commands. So you just here admitted that in one form of a complaint regarding a dog bite incident, you guys sent for further information, and then later the disposition was sent to county council. That was not done to me, so that's bias. So I'm requesting the commission to have a hearing on setting hiring practices or setting up to maybe see who would else be available to be the new IG. And also, I think the commission should also work with DAs and U.S. attorneys and grand juries to present things for cases, because the sheriff department are their own active investigative body, and I don't think that that's fair to the citizens when they will close a complaint out. So I do think it should be a new inspector, and you just admitted on the record that you could have done something in my matter that was not done for me.
Thank you. There are no further public comments on this.
Okay, so we'll move on to the educational presentations, and we're going to start with a presentation on homeless issue and homeless outreach services teams. And I believe we have Captain Jeffrey Diedrich here. Captain Diedrich, could you give us a presentation on what the Sheriff's Department's policies and what it's doing with respect to this issue? Thank you, sir. You have a PowerPoint that goes with this. I've forgotten. No, there we go. Thank you.
Are you able to see that?
Yeah, we will. And I think I have a copy of it in here too. So go ahead.
I'm not sure if you do, but I just want to make sure you have a chance to see it.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We do that.
Okay, that's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm Captain Jeff Diedrich of the Community Partnerships Bureau that oversees our host team. And as we all know, the law enforcement personnel are often the first point of contact with those experiencing homelessness. So since its inception in 2016, HOST was created to exemplify the county's efforts to combat homelessness while enhancing public safety at the same time. And by doing that, we preserve the rights and dignity of people experiencing homelessness while ensuring public safety at the same time. A vital component of HOST success was the integration of a dedicated LASA homeless outreach team to work as one. HOST was the first co-response homeless outreach model with civilian and law enforcement in Los Angeles County history. Next. We attribute the success of the HOST team to 4 pillars. You skipped. Or go ahead, go to the next one. I'm sorry. Next slide. They did some cool graphics for you. We attribute the success to the 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars are vitally important. It's personnel selection, collaborative partnerships, the training the deputies received, and the policies and procedures, which I'll touch on each one of these as we go. The primary HOST mission is to enact the Los Angeles County Homeless Encampment Resolution Protocol, which, as you see with current decisions at the federal and state level, have become quite contentious. Next slide. I have to remember to tell her to go. Our resolution protocol, which was established in 2012, has 5 steps. It's identification, assessment, outreach, posting, and then cleanup, which is encampment resolution. And I'll stop here to say, since the HOST team's inception since 2016, the team's contacted tens of thousands of people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles County and cleaned up thousands of homeless encampments without making any arrests. And to date, doing that process, have 0 uses of force. What differs from us and others is the assessment. The assessment in step 2 is a triage process where it is identified how someone got to where they are, because we believe that's also the path to lead them back. Next slide. And I'm going efficiently due to the time constraints of this, and obviously there can be questions later.
No, take your time.
Slow it down?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Another extremely important mission of HOST since its inception was addressing inclement weather here in Southern California. Hurricane Hillary is the example used here. If it's high winds, if it's extreme cold temperatures, as we've seen up north in the Antelope Valley, if it's very high dangers, high fire, high temperature, no matter what the weather situation is, HOST is deployed. There has been no weather situation since 2016 that the LA County Sheriff's HOST team was not out in the field. And that includes the COVID pandemic, where multiple civilian outreach entities were prevented due to policies from being out in the field. HOST was out there every single day. Next. A very critical mission is the very high fire severity zones. In 2021, the LA County Board of Supervisors took a significant step towards enhancing fire safety by adopting a motion aimed at mitigating fire risks within the very high fire hazard severity zones in the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County. This proactive measure was part of a broader commitment to public safety and environmental stewardship, reflecting the county's dedication to protecting its residents and natural landscapes from the devastating effects of wildfires. By focusing on these high-risk areas, the board sought to reduce potential harm and loss, ensuring that the necessary resources and strategies were in place to combat these fires. HOST partners with our county partners at the Homeless Initiative from the Chief Executive Office, Los Angeles County Fire, LASA, Department of Public Works, Public Health, and I'll even talk about the Department of Mental Health here next. But the collaborative effort that goes in to making sure that one person having a cooking fire in the Santa Monica Mountains doesn't recreate the Woolsey fire is immense. And the amount of man hours and tasks that takes is quite elaborate, and the HOST team's proud of their work. One of the recent developments with the HOST team was the Department of Mental Health joined forces. And the Department of Mental Health funded 2 special HOST deputies. And that DMH HOST team conducts outreach in areas that were considered so dangerous that most civilian outreach entities were unable to go there. And they're heavily populated by those experiencing homelessness. The objective of the DMH HOST deputy program was to reduce the number of individuals with a mental disability living in homeless encampments, reduce incarceration, and provide mental health services, outpatient or inpatient, psychiatric hospitalization, by providing that immediate field-based mental health services, bringing both entities together. That has proved to be invaluable throughout the county, as we do see people presenting in crisis in many homeless encampments that are off the beaten path, and where those that see every day on the streets, where you see that, you call. Well, these folks are in places where they don't call. Another goal of that program, one, is to decrease hospitalization, addressing a situation early on, and also promoting mental health services and education. The deputies and the clinician that are out there are constantly educating those they come across. And also it prevents the use of force. And we've seen that as the number is 0. It also provides mental health interventions. And it brings them in a timely manner instead of reacting after someone's in such a crisis that we can't go backwards unless it's hospitalization. Next slide. Oh, I forgot to tell you next slide. So you go a couple more. One more. Another significant program is our RV HEP, and that's Homeless Encampment Pilot Program. And the RV situation, as many of you seen throughout Los Angeles County, has significantly increased. But if we go back to 2022 and even before the COVID pandemic, there were multiple board motions, but the one in 2022 really addressed some of the concerns that the board had prior to that. But what it led to was a report back that identified that there were over 7,000 RVs believed to be inhabited by those experiencing homelessness in this manner throughout Los Angeles County. So the LA County Sheriff's host team was part of a significant collaboration, and go to the next one, of the CEO Homeless Initiative, the LASA, the St. Joseph Center, Department of Public Works, the Board of Supervisors, along with Public Health and the Department of Mental Health, to come up with strategies to address this situation, because it's quite complex, and there's a 4-hour class just on this. It is not as simple as taking someone and getting them help and putting the RV in a tow yard. It's quite complex, and go to the next slide, which requires many, many layers. Next slide. Many layers of administrative processes, not to simply address the RV, because what we found, and it's even indicated in the board report back, there was significant criminal history going on with people preying on those who were living in recreational vehicles throughout Los Angeles County, to the point to where there were even arsons that resulted in human injury, as people were basically torched out of their RVs because they refused to pay the rent to this new landlord that placed the RV on the street. And as you see in the lower right-hand corner, the board saw it such as a priority in working with the Homeless Initiative from the CEO's office that the host team currently has, for the first time ever, a Los Angeles County Fire Arson Inspector Captain assigned to the host team, who goes out at any inkling of a fire with an RV that is intentionally set. That gentleman's already made 2 arrests, one for attempted murder and one for assault and arson. And those 2 arrests were historic. There was a female African-American elderly woman in an RV, and someone lit it on fire while she was inside. She was luckily saved. Captain Ruelas from the fire department arrested that suspect, along with Host Sergeant George Suarez. So it was pretty amazing effort that went on in this project. With the RV, and I'll touch on it again, is it's taken our encampment protocol to the next step, because it's incorporated the county's Pathway Home Project. And the Pathway Home Project is the conclusion of the LA County Homeless Encampment Resolution Protocol. What Pathway Home means is, if an encampment had 30 people when the deputies began, there were housing placements for those 30 when it ends. And so every single person identified during the process has a placement at conclusion. And as you see, it brings a lot of people to the table, many county departments to accomplish it. And it's been very successful. It will be the model for the nation. As we look at what makes the host team successful, next slide. Actually, we're going to have to probably go a couple. There you go. Is the homeless first responder training. This was a new class that had never before been taught or created on the Sheriff's Department. It began in 2017. Many host members teach it, but they all are experts in this, and this is where it starts. And as a 33-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department, I can tell you this was transformational, not to the deputies working the team, but to the organization, because it changed, and it was a paradigm change of how we viewed things. And without getting into each module, it was understanding the homeless population, stages of homelessness, a de-escalation crisis stabilization, which I'm going to touch on in a moment. Next slide. Approach and contact. But the crux of this training was, to the deputies, you are not the solution. Leverage available resources. We would rather divert someone into care rather than incarceration. Providing people with the connectivity to really have, next slide. And you have this for the commission, you have this PowerPoint, so it'll be available for you. I blanked on where it was, but back to the training. Is really relying on resources. A lot of folks had never heard the term trauma-informed care. That's one of the foundations of this team. Another thing, and if I could, I believe the host team has been successful, probably 99% due to this model. And we ask ourselves, name a de-escalation model for law enforcement? And the answer is you can't, because there isn't one. You hear de-escalation all the time, de-escalate, de-escalate. And one of the questions that we have is, well, what do you do if de-escalation doesn't work? Or when quite often you find yourself saying, well, why didn't the officer or deputy de-escalate? But the deputy says, I tried to de-escalate. So the easy way to explain what I'm about to tell you is, if you inhaled and then you exhaled, what do we call that process? The process is called breathing. So when you look at this, each situation, we look to minimize escalation and maximize de-escalation, which is called crisis stabilization. So why do we call it de-escalation? ROAR has identified a gap in de-escalation training that is illuminated by watching the host team do their work, because the host team's goal is to stabilize the crisis. Now, if it's a high-intensity situation, it goes a little faster. And if it's a low-intensity situation, you're simply keeping the status quo. But if your goal is only to focus on de-escalation and not to minimize escalation, you may have walked yourself into a trap and no one knew it. And we've been teaching it for 20 years. And so the ROAR model has been taught now for the last 5. It's being, under Sheriff Luna's leadership, is being expanded. There's multiple processes on the department now to take this. But we truly believe that the ROAR model, next slide, that the ROAR model is transformational in how we look at de-escalation. So since Mr. Bonner said I could slow down, I'll touch it just for a second. What the ROAR model does is it examines that there's 4 factors in every call that could be stabilizing or destabilizing. You look at the subject, the environment, the victim and informant, and then we tell the deputies, look in the mirror, look at yourself. What do you bring to this? Each one of those categories bring 4, each one of those 4 categories bring very distinct stabilizing and destabilizing factors. And what ROAR stands for is respond, observe, assess, and react. Next slide. And like I said to the commission, we can get into more later, but they'll also be offered for you. What ROAR also does is teaches deputies to look at windows of opportunity. Using the lens of those four components to each call and having stabilizing and destabilizing factors is, can you recognize windows of opportunity to develop rapport? And understanding that a rapport window is your safety window. Rapport window is your practical window. Your tactical window is your safety window. And understanding that strategic focus on opening those windows lead to more positive contacts and a safer environment for the deputies to work in. Next slide. When Sheriff Luna took office and the Board of Supervisors had a certain amount of money for the host police department independent project, Sheriff Luna signed the MOU with the police chief at the time, and we now provide training. We have trained over 387 police officers from independent PDs in the ROAR model and the homeless first responder training. And then the county funds their PDs to do host type training in the field. Some of it's collaborative with us, some of it's on their own. But that money comes from the county, and it is in the MOU. They may only access it if they've had our training. Been tremendously successful. Next slide. One of the reasons I use this slide is we're very blessed because I also oversee our mental evaluation team, and we have our own training facility in the City of Industry, and that's where we hold all of our training. And that's where I invite any committee member or commission member, that would like to come to the ROAR training. We'll be glad to set it up for you. We've had people from all over the world come, and so we really invite, especially the commission that's evaluating things, to come and see what we're training the deputies. And I think using that lens of ROAR, understanding that the goal isn't just to de-escalate. I think we've, as a profession, we've looked at it wrong. Not because we didn't know better. I think it's a new time, and using ROAR is understanding minimize escalation, maximize de-escalation, and that's crisis stabilization. And then taking those components and understanding the stabilizing, destabilizing factors. I think it'll be, when we look back 5 years from now, I think it's going to be a point in time that we recognize some changes. And then I'll conclude, although I did go a little fast, Mr. Bonner, because I don't think you want to be here too late. The pictures that I'm going to show you now, you don't normally see. They're untraditional. Next slide. We always say that the host team is a humanitarian mission, and the work that we do enhances public safety. Next slide. That was a gentleman that needed to go to a job interview that asked a deputy to help him button his shirt. You don't see this on the front page. Next. That was a veteran. That deputy's 14-year-old daughter knew that her dad was helping a vet, and that daughter walked in and handed her father a TV for that veteran so he'd have one when he got his new place. Next. The deputy is so proud of reconnecting elderly elderly lady with her daughter. As you see, that's thumbs up. Go ahead. Don't see that very often. That was a young mother who had been homeless for multiple years, living in a hole in a riverbed. And that deputy sheriff wouldn't go home until she took the help. And this one, this tells the story. This child and her mother were found in an area they shouldn't have been. And we ended up, there was actually a warrant for the child, but it needed to be taken into custody. But those that, and I heard the word compassion here earlier, and we get it, there's always challenges. I think that deputy's face talks about who the men and women of the Sheriff's Department are. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for that insightful presentation, Captain Dietrich. Stick around for a moment. We might have a few questions.
Sure.
But what I'm going to do, though, before we put questions to you, with the permission of the commission, is perhaps just do our next presentation, and then we can take questions, maybe ask questions, and then we'll go to public comment. And I think we need to do that if we're going to honor our commitment to this facility to be done by 1. So if we could, let's turn to the next presentation, which is on use of force. And I've forgotten, I think Sergeant, why don't you step forward, and you're going to give us the highlights of the relatively recent changes to use of force policy within the LS Sheriff's Department. And then we'll have maybe a time for the IG to also make some comments. Go ahead.
Blessings. Good afternoon. My name is Ismael Opina. I'm a sergeant with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, assigned to Training Bureau's Force Training Unit. Today, I'll be presenting the recent updates to the department's use of force policy. These updates are the results of months of dedicated effort to ensure that our policy was not only comprehensive, but also fully compliant with state law. We have worked with the U.S. Department of Justice, County Council, the Office of Constitutional Policing, and our labor unions. This collaboration has been essential in developing a policy that reflects our commitment to public safety and to upholding constitutional standards. I'm grateful to share the results with you today. As we go through this presentation, I will be reading portions of the policy verbatim to ensure accuracy and clarity. Next slide, please. For the agenda of this presentation, I will be going through a brief introduction, a review of the department's preamble to use of force. I'll be discussing some of the policy's core principles, which are de-escalation and force reduction. We will also be looking at force guidelines, carotid restraints and chokeholds, which are not authorized, prohibited force, reporting categories, preventing asphyxia, and I will end with the conclusion. Next slide, please. On July 19th, 2024, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department updated its use of force policy. The revised force policy complies with California state law, specifically Penal Code sections 835A, which changed the law governing the use of deadly force, and Government Code sections 7286 and 7286.5, which requires every law enforcement agency to implement and maintain a force policy that includes about 20 different benchmarks. The department followed these statutes while revising its force policy and worked extensively with both ALADS and POPA, and both labor organizations have approved the revised use of force policy. Today, I'll be giving an overview of the significant changes and additions made to the department's use of force policy. Next slide, please. Our preamble to use of force. The LASD's preamble to the use of force is the introduction to the policy. It reaffirms LASD's commitment to preserving human life in a fair and unbiased manner while upholding rights protected by the Constitution, federal law, and state law. It emphasizes that when force is used by a department member, the amount of force used must be objectively reasonable, proportional, and reasonably appear necessary. This is critical to ensure that force used is justified and appropriate. Proportional. Proportional means the level of force must reflect the totality of the circumstances surrounding the situation at hand. Given the totality of the circumstances, there is a balance between the threat posed, the seriousness of the suspected offense, and the amount of force used. Proportional force does not require department members to use the same type or amount of force as the suspect. The more immediate the threat and the more likely that the threat will result in death or serious physical injury, the greater the level of force that may be proportional, objectively reasonable, and reasonably appear necessary to counter it. Additionally, the preamble now highlights that the use of force against vulnerable individuals, such as children, the elderly, pregnant persons, or those with physical or mental health disabilities, should be a last resort. When evaluating the use of force against such individuals, the totality of the circumstances must be considered. Next slide, please. De-escalation. De-escalation is a core principle of sound tactical operations. Department members shall consider de-escalation and crisis stabilization techniques to be part of tactical planning. The overall goal when using...
Sergeant, I don't know that you need to read all of this, but I will say that this is what's new, right? De-escalation is a new policy, use of force policy within the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, sir.
All right, so just, okay, briefly review it, and you might need to move it a little.
Yes, sir.
Faster clip here.
Goal of de-escalation is to decrease the intensity of a situation. In addition, use other options other than force to mitigate the need to use a greater amount of force to safely resolve a situation. Avoiding unnecessary escalation. Department members should avoid tactics that escalate situations unnecessarily. De-escalation techniques are to be used whenever reasonably safe and feasible to do so. Some examples are slowing down the incident, seeking distance and cover, calling for backup or the mental evaluation team, requesting a supervisor. Department members are asked to think of themselves as resource managers when it comes to using de-escalation techniques. Next slide, please. When a department member is involved in the use of force, the force can increase and decrease based on the suspect's actions. While a greater level of force may initially be required to gain control of an assaultive suspect, department policy now requires that that level of force must be reduced when the department member has achieved control and it is reasonably safe and feasible to do so. Next slide, please. The policy update has also expanded on factors to consider when determining if the force used was reasonable. Some of the key factors are the immediate threat to safety, self and others, severity of the crime, subject's level of resistance, feasibility of de-escalation, environmental conditions, and resources. These are just 5 out of the 24 factors listed in the policy. These factors help in making well-informed decisions during high-stress situations. Next slide, please. Carotid restraints and chokeholds. New sections have been added to the use of force policy specifically addressing carotid restraints and chokeholds. These sections state that the carotid restraint and chokeholds are not authorized. Any use of these improvised techniques will be investigated as a Category 3 use of force with a mandatory Internal Affairs Bureau review. Next slide, please. Unreasonable force and duty to report. The definition of unreasonable force is that force that is excessive given the totality of the circumstances presented to the department members involved in using force, judged by the perspective of a reasonable person. Department members must only use force that is proportional and reasonable. Unreasonable force is prohibited and may lead to disciplinary actions and/or criminal prosecution. Members who witness unreasonable force must intercede safely and document their actions thoroughly in reports. Some ways to intercede include physically stopping the unreasonable use of force, safely confronting the department member as that unreasonable force is occurring, using communication techniques to calm and promote rational decision-making. Next slide, please. Prohibited actions. Kicks or knee strikes to the face, head, or neck of a person is a Category 3 use of force and is prohibited unless deadly force is justified. Improvised weapons. In emergent situations where it is impractical or ineffective to use approved, authorized techniques, tools, weapons, or force options described in department policy, department members may need to resort to improvised techniques or weapons. Any use of improvised weapons or techniques must be objectively reasonable, proportional, and reasonably appear necessary under the totality of the circumstances. Pointing a firearm at a person. Pointing a firearm at a person now requires reporting the incident to a supervisor if a firearm is intentionally pointed at someone. Pointing a firearm at a person when there has been an allegation that that pointing of a firearm violates policy is considered a Category 1 use of force. In any dangerous incident where the totality of the circumstance creates an objectively reasonable belief that a department member may need to use their firearm, they may display their firearm to the threatening person to establish or maintain control of the incident. In the absence of an imminent threat, but where a potential threat exists based on the totality of the circumstances, department members should generally point their firearm in a safe direction and not at any person.
That, by the way, is also a new requirement for the first time in the Sheriff's Department history, that drawing of a weapon is now a reportable use of force, has to be reported. Go ahead, sir.
Sir. In situations where department members reasonably believe an imminent threat exists based on the totality of the circumstances, the department member may point their firearm at the threatening person or animal until they no longer reasonably perceive the threat. Next slide, please. Consistent with Government Code Section 7286.5, subsection A2, the department now has policy consistent with preventing, now has policy on preventing compressional and positional asphyxia. Positional asphyxia can be caused by a department member placing their weight on a person in a manner that compresses their airway and reduces the likelihood they will be able to breathe normally. When a department member uses pressure or body weight in an attempt to control a subject who is resisting, they may not use that pressure or body weight in a manner that has a substantial risk of interfering with the subject's breathing. Once the subject is restrained and controlled, the department member will immediately stop applying body weight pressure to the suspect's back, head, neck, chest, or torso, and seek other control tactics reasonably available. Next slide, please. In conclusion, these policies are designed to ensure that force is used reasonably, proportionately, and with the utmost regard for human life. Department members are responsible for familiarizing themselves with these changes and the department's use of force policy. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Sergeant Espina, and the Sheriff's Department's be commended for making these important improvements in reform and use of force policy. I can't tell you how important it is that this commission and the public understand the use of force policy as best you can, because we need to make sure that the Sheriff's Department does train and hold deputies accountable for not complying with policy. I made a statement, but let's get the OIG's response, Peter, or input with respect to this issue. Open it up for questions of the commission, and we'll go to public comment. Peter?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. just to go through a few of the issues that we highlighted, that we would like to highlight. I mean, first of all, to clarify with respect to the process, the Office of Inspector General was provided a draft copy of this policy prior to the meet and confer process and provided comments to the department at that time. We have not been permitted to monitor the evolving policy through the meet and confer process or been provided with updated versions of the policy through that. So after we provided those comments prior to the meet and confer last summer, the next time we saw a version of the policy was when it was publicly released. And just that's to make clear our role in the process. I should say the department took many of the comments and suggestions that our office made and did not take many of them as well. But in looking at the use of force policy as a whole, I think we were looking for a few major issues. I'll start by looking at de-escalation, an area where the department incorporated meaningful changes to de-escalation throughout. The department made a de-escalation mandatory in response, in fact, to a comment of our office, as reflected in Captain Diedrich's comments about the ROAR model. One of the things the policy does is now incorporate in the concept of de-escalation the idea that deputies should not escalate as part of that, its definition of de-escalation. And it incorporates de-escalation throughout the whole policy. It's not just kind of in the provision of that under de-escalation. So when the policy defines unreasonable force, it does so now not just with reference to the Graham standard, but it talks about California case law Hayes and statute that talk about the actions of the deputy leading up to the use of force. So incorporates concepts of de-escalation and adds de-escalation to the factors that should be considered in evaluating force. The department, related to de-escalation, did not take our office's recommendation to expressly define less lethal force and set clear standards for use. Obviously, with respect to some less lethal techniques, those are addressed in separate policies, like the CEW, the conducted energy weapon or taser policy. Moving on from de-escalation, one of the other major things that we were looking for was this policy change was motivated in significant part by changes to state law that went into effect in 2020. Both changes to the legal standard for the use of force in California Penal Code 835A, and some new specific requirements for agencies' use of force policies that were enacted in Government Code 7286. One of the concerns that we had about the policy that we voiced in our comments was that although the policy does clearly state the new state law standard, does correctly state the new state law standard for deadly force, there are places where it talks about force generally. One of the major changes in 2020 was the state created a new higher standard for deadly force, that it can be used only where necessary under certain circumstances. And the policy continues to talk about use of force generally, the standards for force generally, instead of completely separating into deadly force and non-deadly force. That was a concern we raised, and recommendations we made to more clearly distinguish the standards between deadly and non-deadly. The department didn't take, but as I said, it does correctly state the legal standards for deadly force. The policy does make clear that, for example, in the firearms section, that every shot fired has to comply with the standards for deadly force set forth in the policy. And I think to the extent that our office had concern that talking about standards of use of force generally and using the reasonableness standard, which no longer applies for deadly force under California law. That can be addressed in training and in review. One other area we were looking at was the review process. Our office in prior reports has consistently raised concerns that in reviewing uses of force and other incidents, reviewers can miss evidence, miss important documents, that that documents and evidence aren't necessarily meaningfully presented to the review panel, and that there's a lack of a record to memorialize the decision, the factual and policy basis for the decision. One of the improvements here is that the new policy requires EFRC to include a written memo detailing the factual basis and analysis for whether the action is in or out of policy, and requires a division chief who seeks to modify the findings after a Skelly process to author a memo setting forth the factual basis for that. An additional improvement to the investigation policy is that the anti-huddling process requirement from the CDM manual, the requirement that deputies be separated following a serious use of force before that is now incorporated into this policy. Here, I think the proof is really going to be in the pudding of whether the department uses these requirements to the more detailed factors that it has to undertake thorough and evidence-based evaluations of use of force and really articulates those in these memos. One recommendation that our office made that the department didn't adopt in this policy was to task the training department with keeping a record of use of force trends that should be followed up with department-wide training for persistent issues. That although the department didn't do that in this policy, we continue to recommend the department does that. It's not necessary to enshrine it in this policy for the department to do that. Those are sort of the biggest overarching themes. So I will stop there and I'm available for questions.
Thanks for that report, Mr. Biebring. So let's open it up for the commissioners for any questions they might have for Captain Dietrich and or Sergeant Espina and or Deputy Inspector General Biebring on the two presentations. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Hicks.
And this is is it Sergeant Opina? Just a couple quick follow-ups. I think you said it, but I just wanted to confirm in the consideration for vulnerable populations as it relates to use of force, it says and those with disabilities, that includes mental and physical disabilities?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So does the actual policy say both mental and physical? Or
Yes,
does it
sir.
just say disabilities?
It says both, sir.
And then the MET team, I see that there's a technique calling for backup or the MET team. Are there only certain hours that the MET team is available?
Yes, sir. 22 hours a day. Our desk is staffed 24, but there's a 2-hour gap, I believe from 2 to 4 in the morning where there's no clinician, but the MET team is out.
And are there like guidelines as to when the deputies, because I know every situation is fluid, when they should call the MET team as
Yes.
opposed to taking action with use of force first?
Yes, sir. There's a field operations directive. It's 16-003 that outlines when a deputy is to call MET.
Okay.
We can provide that to the commission.
Would you please? Thank you. We'll circulate it. Provide it, if you would, to the executive director, or she'll get it.
Well, if I could just add some clarity to that also, although a MET team may be available 22 hours a day, we are woefully understaffed on MET teams, and that is not exclusively the fault of the sheriff's department. There's another player here, DMH, and I know they have their challenges hiring people. I get all that. But the MET team, as successful and effective as it is, we just don't have enough of them. So although Captain Dietrich's correct, you may be lucky and you'll be geographically close to that unit to respond in those 22 hours a day, but you may not be lucky. So we need to consistently work towards encouraging the Board of Supervisors to use whatever influence they have with all of our partners to increase the size and the number of our Met teams.
And I appreciate that, Commissioner Harris. And to the question, I didn't want to give that false sense of hope. Yes, there's a team, but that doesn't guarantee they're there, because currently, although even I think this body, and I don't think I'm overspeaking, this body, the Office of Inspector General, the Sheriff's Department, and the board has all said we needed a minimum of 60 teams. You currently have 34.
So the line item budget issue that you would suggest that more money be allocated to Met teams so they're more available? Or do you think it's more beneficial to specifically hire deputies with that training already?
That's a big discussion. The first part is a little over my rank. However, because there is consensus on the necessity, I can say as a 33-year veteran, our scarcity of resources on the department, it's going to be very difficult to grow the Met team under the current situations that our stations and our custody facilities are experiencing. We are looking at alternatives to, like what you said, is about, can you take a deputy and give them this specialized training and make that their focus? And then also broadening through the Department of Mental Health, what qualification the person would need to be in that Met team, because right now it's a licensed clinical social worker. Could you do some things? We are looking at that. So the short answer is yes, there are some options, but I just didn't want to give that to Commissioner Harris's point that, oh, they'll just show up and everything's fine.
You know, the goal of the commission is to have enough Met teams so that there's no excuse for a deputy who's on the scene not calling a Met team when he's dealing with a mentally ill person who is either threatening to himself or threatening to others. That's the goal, because that will prevent an unnecessary death. And part of achieving that goal is to getting to 60 Met teams. So I'm going to ask the use of force and maybe the budget committee both to take a look at how we could possibly do something about the staffing issue that is essentially impeding the full staffing that we've recommended with respect to Met teams. Patty, did you have a comment?
Thank you both. Sounds like a presentation. This body has been extremely supportive of the increase of Met. I think we went from 20 to 34 because of our recommendation, but it's been a few years now since that has increased, I believe. So the need continues to be there, even though I know we're looking at other community approaches and collaborations for de-escalation and serving people who are in crisis. So my question though is, maybe it's a little geeky, but am I under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that ROAR might have been based on some of the principles of Met with the de-escalation, et cetera? Or I'm seeing the kind of similarities, a lot of wisdom in both of those programs. So just wondering what the relationship of the two programs are.
So we're very blessed in having our partnership on the department with Psychological Services Bureau, because we have two doctors, two legit doctors from that bureau. Some have over 20 years of law enforcement experience in the car with police. Dr. Pietro D'Angelo, along with some of his cohorts at the time, are the ones that developed ROAR. And so he is on our mental evaluation training team. And what that gap is, because I was kind of going a little hastily, is that it's not that de-escalation the way it's been taught is wrong. But the question is this: if it's not a process and it's technique driven, what do you do when you run out of techniques?
Right.
That's some of the issues a lot of the folks in the room have. What do you do if you run out of the techniques? ROAR is a process. So I look at ROAR as a hallway, and there's multiple doors, but every door you open has another hallway to another door. So it never runs out. So you always have another option. Now, sometimes the option's dictated by a lethal encounter, which sadly enough that is, but what we can do is look back at many other things and say, there was another thing, but can we fault the deputy if all they were done is techniques and they used them all and they didn't work? And so we want to step back, and if you look at the force policy, it does say de-escalation, comma, crisis stabilization, that's ROAR.
Mm.
So ROAR is the crisis stabilization, because what we want to do is empower the deputies not to be technique driven. Well, yes, techniques are used within ROAR, but if it's a process, it doesn't end. And we don't want to see our deputies only be taught techniques like, and I'll repeat it. What do you do when every technique you know fails? And so ROAR changes that.
And it seems to me that taking the time, whether it's with MET or with ROAR, with the homeless host, et cetera, that's such a key. And that's got to be, that's a learning curve, not to be rushed to de-escalate or figure out what comes next.
And that's a tremendous fact that you're bringing up, because I think our patrol folks are being rushed. They're being hurried. Because of the staffing shortage, they are having that burden on them, where I will tell you host and MET do not. So where are you seeing such reduces and reductions of force? Host has 0, but they also are not worried about time.
Right.
MET is not worried about time. Patrol is. And I think that, and I say the ruthless elimination of hurry, the more hurried you are, the more everything's going to fall apart. Because how do you do a rapport building model if you can't build rapport because you got 9 calls to go to next? And so I believe that is a challenge for all of us to look at. But our patrol folks do not have the luxury that host and MET has when it comes to the elimination of hurry.
Okay, one more question. We need to go to public comment, but Mr. Callaway. Commissioner Callaway.
Finish?
Pardon?
Can I finish?
Pardon?
One more comment.
Well, go ahead, Patty.
Yeah. And anyway, we used to have a Met ad hoc, which we no longer have. But I'm wondering if we could, Chair Bonner, get a report from Met on how they're doing and what the needs are, and kind of refresh looking back over at Met.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll.
Yeah.
I hear you.
That.
Tracy, I'll be talking to you soon.
Great.
So that's in the hands of our executive director and staff. Mr. Callaway, Commissioner Callaway, choose.
So I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So one statement, maybe the Met team should do exit surveys to see why they're leaving, because usually staffing,
I apologize, sir. No one's leaving Met.
No, I mean, like, if you can't staff it, then it means to me, if it's a staffing problem, that we need to actually ask the Met team, why isn't it being staffed? Because if I have friends, I might ask for a person to be hired, like if I'm in that community. And if it's not a problem, then cool. I'm just saying, just a thought.
No,
I don't need a response to that. But I do want to understand, because I don't understand if de-escalation, because it seems like the policy is saying, like, you are now just stating de-escalation in the policy. That's what we're doing, is defining it, stating it. But I've had interactions with the sheriffs, and then when I don't think they were de-escalating, and then they say that they were doing the de-escalation policy, how do I get information or proof or the video or the calls or anything to actually hold someone accountable for not following the policy? Because saying the policy, I love it, just like everybody else, it's great. But how would someone be able to say that the cop didn't ask for my license or my registration, just told me to get out of the car and handcuffed me and sat me on the curb? That's not de-escalation, but how would I prove that afterwards? Because that is literally a personal experience that I've had.
I'm just going to say, look, I think we should talk about this a little bit offline. I mean, I know what the sheriff's department would do. I mean, if there were an out of policy, if it appeared to be out of policy, that de-escalation didn't take place, there would be an investigation, and potentially by internal affairs. But the other question is, how do we as an oversight body make sure that that was appropriately looked into in terms of was in fact de-escalation used? That's an oversight role. That's a hugely broad question, and I'm a little bit concerned because Captain Dietrich might be here to answer that question offline, but I actually think we need to get to public comment if we're going to finish at 1. So if you would, could you stand by for maybe another 15 minutes or so, Captain?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. What do we have for public comment, both on this item and then ultimately let's roll into any general public comment?
We have 3 in person and 3 online for this item. The first in-person public comment is Raquel Derfler.
All right, we're in the afternoon again. So Raquel Derfler canceled the contract. I want to talk about this use of force. So on the surface, it looks kind of cool, right? And they're patting themselves on the back. But like to quote the Clueless movie, like it's a Mona Lisa, because far away it looks real good, but when you come up close, it looks really bad. Okay. So I want to talk about them talking about a duty to intercede. So if a deputy sees another deputy doing something bad, how do we know as the public that they didn't intercede? And you're going to say, the department's going to say, well, they wear body cam footage. Yeah, but you can turn your body cam off. So how do I know? We don't know. We don't know. There's no specificity when it comes to that portion. Let's talk about the prohibition of carotid restraints in compliance with California law. That's in direct conflict with, if you look through this slideshow, when it talks about avoid compressing the airway, but it does not straight out say do not. They use the language so they can weave and dodge, like they're going to look and say, well, we put avoid, not like it's you cannot do it. And then when it's talking about control tactics, cease body weight pressure once other reasonable options are available, once control is achieved. But it doesn't say what part of the body that they can put the pressure on. So how do we know it's not on their necks? And then the other thing that was really weird is that they can use improvised weapons. So they do not actually lay out what is acceptable and what is not used, you can't use. Like, is improvised a rock? Is it a brick? Is it a shovel? Is it your freaking foot? So there's like no specificity, but it's done deliberately. So when, once again, the sheriff's or the deputy does that thing, we cannot come back and say they violated that policy, because they're going to say there's not a policy that addresses that.
Thank you. The next public comment, Cindy Nunez. She's gone. Vanessa Perez.
I want to say that was a great presentation that Diedrich presented, but the reality of it is that surviving an arrest from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department looks like this. That's what it looks like. It doesn't look like those pretty little pictures that were up there. And I've called the PET team multiple times for Joseph, and you would think that they would already have some type of relationship, knowing how mental Joseph really is before they beat him. Thank you.
Thank you. The next public comment is online. We'll have Benny Adrian. Benny, you have been unmuted.
Hello and thank you once again. I'm Benny Adrian Martinez. I'm with Centro CSO. I'm trying to do my best to represent the community in Boyle Heights, East LA. And listening to both of the presentations, I hear the first officer asking for more funding for a program that, a MET team training is required, and then the funding is ambiguous as to whether it's, controlled, directed, or just dropped into the bucket, use for however they like, buying more weapons or whatever the case may be. Now, they might have a very similar kind of training, and most likely because it's easy to copy and paste, change some words around. One of the things I'd really be interested in is that there could be a study about, how much more effective it might be to have a program designed by any of the numerous nonprofits that have done a lot more with less for the homeless. And also maybe understanding that there's a lot of built-in biases when folks are being approached by sheriffs and maybe not even wanting to deal with them in those situations. With regards to de-escalation, escalation of force, it sounds like, somebody had an opportunity to rehearse and had to read cards because they're not very well trained in this aspect already, which to me is just beyond me when I think of security. And It's just that if they're not dog people, they can shoot a dog. So if they're not people, they can shoot a person. That's the interpretation I'm getting. These so-called trainings, they're built-in excuses. There's a lot of may lead to, appear to lead to escalation. Give no lateral limits to define what's right and what's wrong to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next online public comment is from Carlos Montes. Carlos, you have been unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Carlos Montes again. I'm with Centro CSO Community Service Organization. We're also long-standing members of the Check the Sheriff Coalition. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, training is always very important. It needs to be continued, right? But also our general slogan and demand is funding for human needs, not for more police. LEPD and the sheriff, they always ask for more money no matter what's going on. So we need more med teams. We need more intervention teams. So I'll say, again, fund human needs and not more police. And the other thing I want to add, there's a lot of great organizations in my community that do great jobs. East LA Women's Center, the SEA, the GRID program, AMA Family Services. We need them to be funded. They're always underfunded. The other thing I want to point out is that the thing I should have mentioned earlier, the question of racism. Look, I grew up and live in East LA, and we are treated as peons, second-class citizens by the sheriff. The sheriffs drive around like they own East LA, like they're the kings of East LA. If we look the same, different, or we look at them or stare at them or walk differently, they put us up against the wall, just like the one of the commission members said. They pull you out, sit you on the ground, handcuff you, go through your pocket, go through your car without any probable cause. You're right. The last time I got stopped, they finally realized, oh, this is an old brown beret, get out of here. They kept asking me, where are the guns? Where are the drugs? And I said, I'm an old active. I don't have any guns. I don't have any drugs. They didn't believe me till finally they ran a check on me and said, oh, this is an old brown beret. Get out of here, And I was just sitting in my car talking to someone in the evening, right? So anyway, we need more intervention.
Thank you.
Our last public comment on this item is from Julie Martinez. Julie, you have been unmuted.
To speak on both presentations. The first presentation was missing community comment from people who actually do work with compromised individuals and homeless and houseless individuals. But I want to spend my time talking about the second presentation regarding de-escalation and use of force. I did not see any significant changes because the policy that was presented was very similar to our national standards that already existed. I didn't see a huge policy change. More importantly, I am the grandmother of Paul Rea, who was murdered by a deputy sheriff who was part of the gang member in East LA station. I didn't see any requirement within that policy which would protect fellow officers who can be provided safety and witness protection to testify against their fellow officers. The sheriff department, LASD, can only be cleaned up if there are existing good officers and deputies who will speak out against it. And my personal story, my grandson, when he was murdered at a routine traffic stop, there was secret video and audio that was taken. The other sheriff deputy that was there is on video and audio explaining or stating to the fellow officer, why did you shoot? Why did you use force? Why did you use deadly force? It was obvious that the other deputy sheriff in attendance did not believe that it was necessary. There was raw footage that explained it. And I'll leave you with this. There are 7 words that every sheriff will say. I believe my life was in danger. That is why these policy changes will mean nothing.
Thank
Sheriffs will simply say, my life was in danger and they're
Thank you. There are no further public comments on this item.
Now,
Chair.
are there general public comments?
We have general public comments.
So let's go to general public comments.
Okay, our first general public comment, we have Young Park.
Mr. Hart.
Young Park.
Oh, Park. He's
Young.
left. He apparently is not here. I don't see him.
Raquel Derfler. Cindy Nunez. Minerva. Andy Love.
Oh, she's here, isn't she? Sure.
Hey y'all, this was good. How y'all feeling? I'm Andy Love. I'm just kidding. My name is Allende. So my I'm here with Sanctuary of Hope, Gifted Arts and Activism, and the main reason why I'm here right now is to urge you guys for the elevation of names that are passing through SB2 and the decertification process that's taking place right now. In 2020, there was a officer by the name of Ty Shelton who was involved in a deputy-involved shooting and ended the life of a 62-year-old Black man by the name of Michael Thomas. And during that time, SB2 was not enacted or not in place yet. From there, we spent time advocating to try to make sure that this officer did not have the opportunity for this thing to happen or occur again. We stated at that moment that if he was allowed to patrol the streets again, he would kill again. And then this year, Nayani Finlayson has been murdered by the same officer. So what we're asking now is that one of the rulings on SB2 to elevate and make sure that one of the officers can be decertified is if excessive force leads to death or serious bodily harm, which Shelton matches the criteria perfectly. And we want to ensure that he is not able to just move to another police force from here and repeat the same acts again. So we're asking for the COC to now begin to work on behalf of elevating those names. We know that there's a back due process and that the process of SB2 is already embedded in the reporting, but the elevation of those names and the advocacy of those names from the COC could be monumental in moving those things forward. So we just ask for those things to be considered and moved on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here. Our next speaker is Vanessa Perez. Passes. We have T. Carter.
So I may mention a few things that I reiterated before, but just to make sure that things are clear, because I keep coming down here and I hear the same speeches from the panel, but nothing is changing. So maybe I should repeat it over again. In response to the things that were mentioned in the prior meeting, I would like to make a suggestion that the Office of Inspector General forms, or the actual commission forms, a relationship with either district attorney or the U.S. attorney, so that when certain things come through as investigations where on face there's a discrepancy, the U.S. attorney or the district attorney can maybe funnel this out through a grand jury versus having full control of an investigative body who does unethical things. Second, today, I heard the Inspector General state to me, or someone that was reviewing his reviewing the Inspector General's findings, stated that they sent further information requests out on a complaint regarding a dog bite. When I asked in regards to my matter being sent back out to get further information or get further to be further investigated, I was told that could not happen. I was told that by the office, this female here, she told me that, you know, there are guidelines and at what the inspector can do. So being that he admitted today that that could have been done, he showed a response where someone was bitten by a dog and they sent for further review. I'm going to be filing a claim, a board of supervisors county claim against the county, because he admitted here on the record today it could have been done. So that further shows neglect and non-compliance by the Inspector General, because I was told that could not be done. And I also filed a complaint against the inspector 4 months ago, and this commission has not stated anything. So I will be filing a county claim form, and I guess the commission can respond to the county claim form, because that's a form of negligence and non-compliance, and he's getting paid by county taxpayers. So I'll be filing a county claim because I keep coming here and you guys aren't doing anything. So the fact that he's admitted to more could have been done on my matter, I'll be filing a county claim form. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, we have Tony Rajim Rumford Bay.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My name is Tony Raheem Rumford Bay. I'm requesting evidence from the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department. I was falsely arrested and kidnapped out my backyard and held for 12 hours. They entered private property with no search warrant or no permit from me telling them to come in my backyard. On about January 28th, 2023, Mr. Rumford was detained private property was entered without permission to enter and entered by 4 deputy sheriffs and wrestled down to the ground and detained in a police vehicle for approximately 3 hours in unhuman restraints. Upon exiting the police vehicle at the sheriff's station located in the city of Lancaster, both of my wrists were bleeding. Mr. Rumford was booked and charged with a 272 A1 PC contributing to a minor. Case number 923-01. Mr. Rumford was detained for 12 hours and released the following day on his own recognizance. After reviewing the facts, it was thereby determined by the city attorney they had no legal grounds for entering my private property backyard, arresting me. And this case was resulted in a district attorney reject. Defendant received a ticket and contacted the court to obtain a court date and was informed that this matter was a DA reject. The DJ found no legal grounds for the sheriff entering the private property and no evidence to charge Mr. Rumford with contributing to a minor. No minors were there. And Sergeant, when the charges resulted from us in case thrown out of and dismissed, no further actions were taken. Sergeant Murray Jacob actions were depriving me of my civil rights by coming on private property without a search warrant and without my permission and kidnapping me out of my backyard and detaining me for 12 hours. This is a true example of police harassment and a violation of my constitutional civil rights.
Thank you.
Can you repeat your name, please?
Tony Raheem Rumford Bay.
Thank you.
Well, no, if you have copies of it, yeah, why don't you submit one to our staff over
Okay, you
there?
can bring your information over here, sir.
Okay. Are there any more public comments?
Yes, we have 2 more. Juanita Carrell.
Oh, I'm here today. I had a personal injury against CVS. And the Lancaster Sheriff Department came out, did the investigation, did the police report and everything. Come 2 years later, after I had got an attorney, come to find out they got rid of the police report. All my evidence, the surveillance footage the CVS gave them, they got rid of that. My statement, they got rid of that. I have the original police report that I got the night of my incident, but it's not in the system. And I've been fighting with the Justice Department, the Inspector General, Catherine Bro's office, FBI. Everybody. I've been going around the world, and I'm here today to make my complaint. So I want to let y'all know, whatever it is I needed to do, just let me know, because like I said, there's a criminal activity going on inside the Sheriff Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment is from Carlos Montez. Carlos, you have been unmuted.
Yeah, this is Carlos Montes calling again with Community Service Organization and Check the Sheriff. I wanted to finish my comment from the last time that we're suffering from a systemic racist oppression, not discrimination. I feel that we are totally oppressed as a people, as Chicanos here in LA, in East LA, and you point out the Southwest. The Raza database did a study of the killings in the United States. Primarily found that large Chicano population cities in the Southwest had a high number of killings by the police. So I want to point it out, and even though the East LA Banditos are a bunch of Chicanos, they're suffering from self-hatred. Anyway, so in closing, again, systemic racist oppression of Chicanos and Blacks and Indigenous people. And, to the public out there, we got to organize and fight back and fight for community control of the police. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. There are no further public comments on this item.
Okay, just before we adjourn, we have a few brief announcements. One is that there will be a joint meeting of the Civilian Oversight Commission and the Civil Brand Commission to take place on September 26, 2024, September 26, later this month at the Irvin Magic Johnson Recreational Arena. Secondly, we've already mentioned the special hearing of the Oversight Commission on October the 11th, 2024. Our next monthly hearing of this commission will be on October 24th, 2024, and our fourth annual Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement Conference will take place on November 8th, 2024. And somebody asked about this, but we'll post the agenda online for that law enforcement conference well in advance, so people know where it's going to take place and what the agenda will be. With that, unless there's any other question or comment by the commissioner or staff, this meeting stands adjourned.
Okay.